Everybody, thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is June 12th, 2026, exactly 7:52 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 22nd book in our Book to React series. This is episode 25 of Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. This is an open source book club library where I come to chop it up with the people and learn with the people at the same damn time. So hopefully you've been watching the entire series. Hopefully you found some other books on this channel that you thought were interesting, or other content that I've put out. As you also see on my channel, my wife and I do movie reviews, so go check out the review we just did for the Iranian film It Was Just an Accident, and all the other back content that continues to get people riled up or also engaged in subscribing as well. So for today's episode, we are reading chapter 24, The July Days, Culmination and Rout. In the previous live stream, we read chapter 23, which is the first chapter of the second volume of Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution, a 3-volume text. So we're just now diving in to part 2. So hopefully you've been able to catch up. And Trotsky was talking about how the workers were organizing a demonstration. They wanted all power to the Soviets. They no longer wanted this dual government. They no longer wanted the bourgeois government. They actually wanted representation by the workers, by the actual people. And it was a very inspiring chapter with some very vivid imagery, because Trotsky is so wicked with the typewriter or the pen. However, he put this together while he was living on the island of Principe, which is in Istanbul, Turkey. So shout out to all my Turks as well. We have both live streams running same time, and we have both sides here. We have the horizontal live stream, and we also have the vertical live stream. And we'll also have, right now, me sending people out to the Gulag and the re-education camp. I have to repeat once again, if you join this live stream, you will talk about the text. You will talk about revolutionary communist ideology. You will talk about how we can radically change this society, not bullshit about how you're gonna slime me. I don't take kindly to death threats, because I know y'all wouldn't talk like that to me in person. So without further ado, let's jump into chapter 24. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this text. Let's get into it. Trotsky says, from that moment, the direct leadership of the movement passed conclusively into the hands of the Petrograd Committee of the party, whose chief force as an agitator was Volodarsky. The task of mobilizing the garrison was assigned to the military organization. The direction of this organization ever since March had been in the hands of 2 old Bolsheviks, to whom the organization was to owe much in its further development. Podolsky was a sharply outlined and unique figure in the ranks of Bolshevism, with traits of the Russian revolutionary of the old type from the theological seminaries, a man of great, although undisciplined energy, with a creative imagination that, it must be confessed, often went to the length of fantasy. The word Podolskyism subsequently acquired on the lips of Lenin a friendly, ironical, and admiratory flavor. But the weaker sides of this ebullient nature were to show themselves chiefly after the conquest of power, when an abundance of opportunities and means gave too many stimuli to the extravagant energy of Podolsky and his passion for decorative undertakings. In the conditions of the revolutionary struggle for power, his optimistic decisiveness of character, his self-abnegation, his tirelessness made him an irreplaceable leader of the awakening soldiers. Nevsky, a university instructor in the past, of more prosaic mold than Podolsky, but no less devoted to the party, in no sense an organizer, and only by an unlucky accident made Soviet Minister of Communications a year later, attached the soldiers to him by his simplicity, sociability, and attentive kindness. Around these leaders stood a group of close assistants, soldiers, and young officers, some of whom in the future were to play no small role. On the night of July 4th, the military organization suddenly came forward to the center of the stage. Under Podolsky, who easily mastered the functions of command, an impromptu general staff was formed. Brief appeals and instructions were issued to all the troops of the garrison in order to protect the demonstration from attack. Armored cars were to be placed at the bridges leading from the suburbs to the capital and at the central crossings of the chief streets. The machine gunners had already, during that night, established their own sentries at the Peter and Paul fortress. The garrisons of Oranienbaum, Peterhof, Krasnoselo, and other points near the capital were informed of tomorrow's demonstration by telephone and special messenger. The general political leadership, of course, remained in the hands of the Central Committee of the party. So at this point, what Trotsky is saying here is that essentially the real government was the Petrograd Soviet. Somebody in the previous live stream said that the Petrograd name is the old name for St. Petersburg. I didn't look that up, but I believe it. But either way, that's a non-point. The point is what Trotsky is trying to tell us. He's talking about this guy, Podolsky, who is the leader of the Petrograd Soviet, and how he was essentially this figure who wasn't a disciplined Marxist, but was sociable, was kind, was a man of the people, and was able to get the soldiers to follow him. So I want to ask everybody who's tuning into this live stream, because we have, about 10 people watching right now, what do you think about non-disciplined Marxists, people who don't traditionally fall within the vein of Marxism, being a part of our movement and bringing their talents into the fold, bringing their skills, whether that be communicating with people, being friendly, sociable, anything like that? Do you think we should welcome those people even if they don't agree or don't understand all the facets of Marxism that we hold to be true? Okay, all right. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. We have to send some people out to the gulag. Okay, so yeah, shout out to Inferno up in the live stream. He said he just ordered a pizza. Okay, hopefully you're watching this live stream while eating your pizza, but I would like to know what you think about the comments. Shout out to Hammerman up in the live stream as well, and shout out to Rapire BN up in the live stream as well. Once again, I want to ask for any volunteers, if there are volunteers in the live stream who would like to be a commissar in the Simon Soviet. If you join the Simon Soviet and you want to be a commissar, you will become a moderator. And with those powers, you will be able to send people to the re-education camp, which means sending people who are white supremacists, fascist, purveyors of discord in the chat to the re-education camp, which is timeout, or to the gulag, meaning permanently banned if they are white supremacists, racist, fascist, etc., etc. Okay, so BML says, I want to join. Okay, if you want to join, I want to ask you, tell me, what are the 3 essential Marxist texts in your opinion, or the 3 best texts you've ever read on Marxism from your own experience? Put those in the chat, BML. I just have to make sure that you're actually serious about joining the Simon Soviet and that you have gone under rigorous study. Continuing here, Trotsky says, the machine gunners returned to their barracks at dawn, tired and, in spite of the July weather, shivering. A night rain had soaked the Putilov men also to the skin. The demonstrators did not assemble until 11 o'clock in the morning. The military sections got there still later. Today, the 1st Machine-Gun Regiment was on the streets to the last man, but it will no longer play the role of initiator as it did yesterday. The factories have moved into the front rank. Moreover, those plants have been drawn into the movement which yesterday stood aside. Where the leaders wavered or resisted, younger workers had compelled the member on duty of the factory committee to blow the whistle as a signal to stop work. In the Baltic factory, where Mensheviks and social revolutionaries dominated, about 4 out of 5,000 workers came out. In the Skorokhod shoe factory, long considered a stronghold of the social revolutionaries, the mood had so sharply changed that an old deputy from that factory, a social revolutionary, did not dare show his face for several days. All the factories struck and held meetings. They elected leaders for the demonstration and delegates to present their demands to the executive committee. Again, hundreds of thousands moved in Radai toward the Tauride Palace. And again, tens of thousands turned aside on their way there to the palace of Kashenskaya. Today's movement was more impressive and organized than yesterday's. The guiding hand of the party was evident, but the feeling too was hotter today. The soldiers and workers were out for a solution of the crisis. The government was in despair, for on this second day of the demonstration, its impotence was even more obvious than on the first. The executive committee was waiting for loyal troops and getting reports from all sides that hostile troops were moving on the capital. From Kronstadt, from New Peterhof, from Krasno Selo, from the Krasnaya Gorka forts, from all the nearby centers by land and sea, soldiers and sailors were marching in with music, with weapons, and worst of all, with Bolshevik standards. A number of regiments were bringing their officers with them, just as in the February days, pretending to be acting under their command. So, once again, Trotsky is pointing out how important the soldiers were to the successful Russian Revolution. Their revolution was not unsuccessful because they had soldiers on their side, or because they didn't go against soldiers. They didn't decide to fight against the soldiers. The double negative messed me up, but you get what I'm saying. I've said this point a million times before. But now the workers are stepping up. It's not, the machine gunners running up to the front. It's actually the workers taking control and getting organized. And I think Trotsky said something like this earlier. Revolution is practice. Revolution is practice. So the workers had been constantly under pressure, organizing, demonstrating, and things like that. And now they've been demonstrating and becoming organized so much that now they're almost like a new sort of military type force. The workers are, in formation, marching down the street, etc., etc. So I think this goes to show us leftists that we have to continually practice. We shouldn't just look at demonstrations as, things that shouldn't be done, because there is no benefit to demonstrating. Demonstrating gives the working class practice for the actual effort of overturning this system. And I do think that right now the right wing is doing a very good job at giving their followers, their lumpen proles, practice. Right now in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, they're burning down the city. That's not unorganized. These are right-wing groups getting in the telegrams, getting in the WhatsApp groups, getting in, the discords or whatever, saying, hey, we're going to meet at so-and-so street at this time and chase black people and chase Muslim people. You get what I'm saying? While we might disagree with it, what we need to be looking at is tactics. And I'm not saying that us leftists need to get in the discourse and just say, hey, let's try to kidnap some capitalists. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that we need to have actual practice for our praxis. You get what I'm saying? But what do you think? What do you think? The more demonstrations, the more activity that we do in the streets, is this actually going to be helpful? Okay? So, shout out to everybody up in the live stream. BML did not answer the question, so I guess he doesn't want to be a commissar in the Simon Soviet. Shout out to Baradak, Ultimate Warrior. He says, do you follow Muhammad? I am a Muslim. I'm a non-practicing Muslim. But that is not the point of what we are talking about. So you will go to the re-education camp. We are talking about Trotsky's history of the Russian Revolution. Okay? So if you are not going to talk about that, get the fuck out of here. All right? Starfall says class war is the real war. Absolutely. But now answer the question, Starfall. Should we be looking at demonstrations as practice for the actual revolution? Because that's what Trotsky has been teaching us through these chapters. Somebody please answer the question. Okay? JRH says liberalism is garbage. Wake up, brother. Number one, please do not call me brother. I am not your brother. I have a real brother. You are probably not him. If you call me brother one more time, instant gulag, instant block. Don't come around here. Call me Simon, Mr. Hill, or Comrade. That's it. That's it. I say this every single time. Do not call me brother. None of you motherfuckers are my brother. Do not do that. Okay? And the second thing I want to say, liberalism is garbage. Absolutely. Liberalism is garbage. We do not advocate for liberalism on this channel. Pay attention. Okay? Islam and leftism does not align with each other. Actually, they do. Actually, they do, and you need to go to the re-education camp for a long-ass time. 30 minutes. Get the fuck out of here. Study. Go and study something. There have been many famous Muslim leftists, Muslim Marxists, okay? Shout out to Jacob. He says, hello, Simon. All right. And shout out to Hammerman, okay? All right. So, Hammerman is up in the live stream. I have to send Hammerman to the re-education camp as well. All right? I have to send Hammerman to the re-education camp as well, because he is not engaging with the several questions. He joined at the beginning of the live stream and did not answer a single question, so he does not need to be around here. And if I see him again, he might go to the gulag unless he actually has reformed his ways. All right, continuing here. The sitting of the government was not over, relates Milikov, when news came from the staff that there was shooting on the Nevsky. It was decided to transfer the sitting to staff headquarters. Here was Prince Lvov, Tsetserelli, Minister of Justice Perevezev, and 2 assistants from the Ministry of War. There was one moment when the situation of the government seemed hopeless. The Preobrazensky, the Semovoisty, and the Izmailovoisty, who had not joined the Bolsheviks, announced to the government that they would remain neutral. On Palace Square, for the defense of headquarters, there were to be found only war invalids and a few hundred Cossacks. General Polovtsev published on the morning of July 4th an announcement that he was going to cleanse Petrograd of armed hordes. The inhabitants were strictly advised to lock their doors and not go out into the streets except in the case of absolute necessity. This threatening order fell flat. The commander of all the troops of the district was able to bring out against the demonstrators only petty detachments of Cossacks and Junkers. In the course of the day, they caused some meaningless shootings and some bloody clashes. An enemy of the 1st Dawn Regiment, guarding the Winter Palace, reported subsequently to a commission of inquiry, "We were ordered to disarm small groups of people who passed by, no matter who they were, and also armed automobiles. To carry out this order, we would run out of the palace on foot from time to time and disarm people." The ingenious tale of the Cossack ensign correctly portrays the correlation of forces and gives a picture of the struggle. The mutinous troops came out of the barracks in companies and battalions, taking possession of the streets and squares. The government troops acted from ambush or made raids in small detachments. That is, they functioned exactly as insurrectionary bands are supposed to do. This exchange of roles is explained by the fact that almost the whole armed force of the government was hostile to it, or at the best, neutral. The government was living by the authorization of the executive committee. The power of the executive committee derived in turn from the hopes of the masses that it might at last come to its senses and take the power. So what we're witnessing right here is a government flailing, doing anything possible to maintain relevance. The executive committee, the bourgeois people who said that we still run the show in Russia, even though the Russian people had started to form their own parallel government, and this parallel government was gaining more power than this executive committee that they had set up. It was essentially meaningless. And now all they have is words. Everybody, stay inside, or else we're going to shoot. And the people said, go ahead, try. We got the guns now, because the soldiers are on our side. Once again, adding on to my defense of my thesis that Trotsky has been telling us that the Russian Revolution was very successful because they were able to co-opt the military, co-opt the police. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin. He says, protest is death, the training ground, and organization is another one. Mutual aid in all of these things. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin, top commissar. He is a top dog in here. Finally, the first question was actually answered. Yes, and I do agree with you, Kirkham Down Stalin. We need to be practicing through demonstrating. So this is why I say, even if we don't like the No Kings rallies, even if we don't think that they will be effective, even if we think they might be counter-revolutionary, I would argue, just being out there, witnessing it, maybe getting involved with a left-wing group in your city or region that's organizing to be a part of the No Kings events or show presence at a No Kings event is going to be helpful in the long run. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of us are reading theory, a lot of us are engaged in conversations online or in person, but there is something about hitting the streets. There is something about seeing police brutality in person. It is something to witness when you actually see people willing to lay their life down on the line. The first protest I was ever involved in was after the murder of Mike Brown, and this was when I was living in Miami, and we all marched down into Wynwood. A bunch of people. I was not a part of any group at that time, but we all marched down into Wynwood, put our hands up. Some people had placards. I didn't have anything. I actually came in my work uniform. I came straight from work, hands up, don't shoot, and we laid down in the middle of the street without trying to block traffic or anything. I'm glad nobody ran us over because you know how white supremacists are. And yeah, we laid down in the street for, I forgot the amount of time Mike Brown was laying down in the street. I think it was like for 16 minutes or something like that to symbolize, you know, his being left, his body being left in the streets for that long. Okay? So, yeah. So shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Kirkham Down Stalin. Shout out to Triggy and World says hi. Mighty Power with those 15 people watching. I'll give you something you can watch. Peter, Nicole, you can watch The Teacher educate you in the re-education camp. Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here. All right? We're sending people to the re-education camp who are not adding on to the conversation. So I want to continue the same question. Should demonstrations be considered practice for the revolution? Okay? Nitin Chopra says, what's your agenda? My agenda is to propagandize to you. My agenda is for you to learn. My agenda is for you to actually engage with Marxist text. And that's why we are reading Leon Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution. So before you say something bourgeois or counter-revolutionary, I'm going to put you in timeout. You get 10 minutes of timeout to actually listen to the fucking text. Okay? All right, we're going to send Luke Hudson to the gulag. All right, sending Luke Hudson to the gulag. That's a troll. All right, and anybody else who wants to get banned, please, please, please. All right. So let's put what's his name? Open source agriculture. Yeah, he's got to go. Boom. That was easy. Anybody else that wants to get banned, please say something right now. If you want to go to the gulag, because it's a big party out there in Siberia, we can send you out there. Say something. Please say something right now. Say something right now so you can go to the gulag. Okay. All right. Shout out to Mike Oxmal. He says, not me. Okay, good. You don't want to go to Siberia. It's very nice in the summer. It's very nice in Siberian summers. It's very nice in Siberian summers. Who else wants to go? Boom. We got one out. Okay. Nas Baz says protests should be peaceful and not blocking traffic, right? Nope. And this is what you can do. Go to the re-education camp. Boom. That was easy. Protests should disrupt society. Any successful protest disrupts society. Nas Baz is probably an American first patriot. What was the first big protest in America? The Boston fucking Tea Party, where a bunch of, you know, American patriots who probably didn't like black people and probably didn't like indigenous people too, broke into a private property which was owned by the British government to knock over some tea because they were upset with taxes, destroying property. I'm sure Nas Bass is an American first patriot who will probably say, yeah, January 6th was just a, you know, a slight inconvenience. It wasn't a major disruption. It wasn't a terroristic act. Nas Bass is probably one of those types of stupid people. So this is what he can do. Go to the re-education camp or to the gulag. I forgot where I sent him. I don't know, and I don't care. Anybody else want to get banned? Anybody else want to go to the gulag? Step on up. Step on up. I will send you there very quickly. Continuing here. The demonstration attained its highest points with the appearance of the Petrograd arena of the Kronstadt sailors. The Kronstadt sailors. Let's read that sentence again. The demonstration attained its highest point with the appearance on the Petrograd arena of the Kronstadt sailors. Delegates from the machine gunners had been working the day before in the garrison of the naval fortress. A meeting had assembled in Yakorny Square, unexpectedly to the local organization, on the initiative of some anarchists from Petrograd. The orators had appealed to the sailors to come to the help of Petrograd. Rout, a medical student, one of the young heroes of Kronstadt, and a favorite on Yakorny Square, had tried to make a speech counseling moderation. Thousands of voices cut him off. Rout, accustomed to a different welcome, had been compelled to leave the tribune. Not until night did it become known that in Petrograd the Bolsheviks were calling the masses into the streets. That settled the matter. The left social revolutionaries, and in Kronstadt there could be no right ones, announced that they intended to take part in the demonstration. These people belonged to the same party with Kerensky, who at that very moment was at the front collecting troops to put down the demonstration. The mood at that night's session of the Kronstadt organization was such that even the timid commissar of the Provisional Government, Trotsky, voted for the march on Petrograd. A plan was drawn up. Transports were mobilized for the necessities of this political siege. 2.5 tons of arms and ammunition were given out from the stores. Crowded on tugs and passenger steamers, about 10,000 armed sailors, soldiers, and workers came into the narrows of the Neva at 12 o'clock noon. Disembarking on both sides of the river, they formed a procession with bands playing and with rifles slung over their shoulders. Behind the detachments of sailors and soldiers came columns of workers from the Petrograd and Vasilevsky Island districts, interspersed with companies of the Red Guard, flanked by armored cars and with innumerable standards and banners rising above them. So I want to ask this question to the audience. Since we have a very engaged and lively audience right now, I want to ask you this question. How do we feel about setting up autonomous zones? I know this question was asked before in a previous live stream, but I want to ask this question in regard to this. Petrograd, or St. Petersburg, whatever the city was essentially ruled by the workers. They had overturned the system, taken over the government there. You know, the police were on their side, the army was on their side, etc., etc. Other parts of Russia were nominally under control of the Soviets, or, you know, at large parts had sway by the Soviets. But the Soviets were not all made up of the Bolsheviks. They were made up of some Mensheviks, some social revolutionaries, some leftists in name only, etc., etc. But the Petrograd Soviet was essentially an autonomous zone, therefore allowing the left to have a base of power within the country to continue to grow and swell. Do you think that this might be a good strategy? So, for example, let's say we take over New Orleans, we take over Memphis, we take over Portland, we take over Seattle or something like that, like how they did with the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle back in, 2021? 2020? I forgot the years or so. But, yeah. Is an autonomous zone a good starting point for the revolution? Or is this counter-revolutionary? Okay? All right. Shout out to Roger Baker. Roger Baker going to the gulag easily. Okay? Yeah, what else? So, Mike, click the description if you want to know what we are reading. Okay? We have to send some more people to the gulag. Okay? Kirkham down Stalin, where you at, man? This should not be my job. Kirkham down Stalin, where you at? This is not my job to send people to the gulag and re-education camp. I'm sorry, man. But in the Simon Soviet, we do have delineation in labor. We do have delineation in labor. And my job here is to be reading, okay? My job here is to be reading, okay? I can't be sending people to the gulag all day. If I do that, we're going to be on live for 3 hours, okay? If I send people to the gulag all day, we're going to be on live for 3 fucking hours, and I don't want to do that. I got other shit to do. Dan Soy says, Slava Ukraine. Shout out to Ukraine. You know, Slava Ukraina. And, yeah, now, Dance, don't say another thing unless it's related to the text. If not, I will kick you out, too. As you see, we're having a gulag train full of people. Okay? Gary Graves says, what about the billions Obama sent to Iran? Okay, this is what I think about the billions Obama sent to Iran. I think that you should go to the re-education camp and learn about that for yourself, because that's not what we're talking about here. All right? Shishi, yeah, Shishi got to go to the gulag too. Okay? All right, and that's about it. Okay, I think we cleared it up. But guys, come on, where my commissars at, man? Where my fucking commissars at? All right? We have to get these motherfuckers out of here, man. Jesus Christ, it's too much. I gotta read this text, man. We got like we got 30 pages to get through, and all I'm doing right now is sending people to the gulag. Oh my God, it's fun at first, but then it starts to get boring. Starts to get boring because their comments aren't even engaging. All right. Oh my God. All right. Anyway, let's continue here. The palace of Kneshskaya. Oh my God. Ksheniskaya. The palace of Ksheniskaya was but 2 steps away. A little lank man, black as tar, Sverdlov, one of the basic organizers of the party elected to the Central Committee in the April conference, was standing on the balcony and in a businesslike manner, as always, shouting down instructions in his powerful bass voice. Head of the procession, advance. Close up ranks. Rear ranks, come closer. The demonstrators were greeted from the balcony by Lunacharsky, a man always easily infected by the moods of those around him, imposing in appearance and voice, eloquent in a declamatory way, none too reliable, but often irreplaceable. He was stormily applauded from below, but most of all the demonstrators wanted to hear Lenin himself. He had been summoned that morning, by the way, from his temporary Finland refuge. And all the sailors so insisted on having their will that in spite of ill health, Lenin could not beg off. An irresistible wave of ecstasy, a genuine Kronstadt wave, greeted the leader's appearance on the balcony. Impatiently, and as always, with some embarrassment, awaiting the end of the greeting, Lenin began speaking before the voices died down. His speech, which the hostile press for weeks after growled over and tore to pieces in every possible manner, consisted of a few simple phrases: a greeting to the demonstrators, an expression of confidence that the slogan, "All power to the Soviets," would conquer in the end, an appeal for firmness and self-restraint. With renewed shouts, the procession marched away to the music of the band. So Trotsky spoke about this before. You know, the Bolsheviks newspaper, I forgot the name, Pravda? I forgot the exact name of the Russian newspaper. But remember, that was secretly traded amongst the sailors. One of the ways the Bolsheviks were able to be successful was that their propaganda was able to infiltrate the military. It wasn't spread out everywhere. It was sort of hard to find, like dirty magazines, like Playboys. You would pass them back and forth. You know what I'm saying? So that's why Lenin was so popular with the sailors. So they come marching into the city, and they're like, we have to hear this guy speak, because we've been reading his shit for the past few months while we've been out at sea for this stupid ass war. And also Trotsky spoke about how Lenin was a unique character. He's not an exceptional character, as if he doesn't come from the same material structure that we come from, but he had a unique talent for public speaking and also just being a pretty friendly guy. I think that's something that also people forget about Lenin's personality. While he does look like in the pictures this angry, bald little man, he was actually pretty personable, because everybody that came across him said nice things about Lenin. You know what I'm saying? He's a pretty cool guy. You'd like to have a beer with him. Okay? So, let's go here. Who needs to go to the gulag? Who needs to go to the gulag? Okay, I agree that autonomous zones... All right, so Mike answered the question about autonomous zones. I agree that autonomous zones are helpful for the left. However, does actions like that acknowledge what everyone else wants, or just the left? And is that respectful of consent? Of course, the people consent to autonomous zones. Autonomous zones are different than what we live like under liberal bourgeois dictatorship right now. Autonomous zones are when the people decide on how things are run. Right now, a lot of us probably agree that marijuana should be legal. A lot of us probably think that marijuana should be legal. Even stupid MAGA Republicans think that marijuana should be legal, even though they continue to vote for people in these red-ass states, like where I'm from in Louisiana, who say that marijuana should allow you to have 3, 4, 5 years in an Angola plantation state prison. Okay? Most people think that marijuana should be legal. So in an autonomous zone, we can actually make things legal that the state has decided are not actually feasible or possible. Once again, going against the will of the people. You get what I'm saying? So yes, autonomous zones are when the people decide what happens in a place. And we don't just let, you know, politicians who never visit our districts, never come to our neighborhoods, only come around when it's election time to actually try to be rulers of our destinies. Okay, I gotta send Master Debater out of here. He's going to the gulag. Who else needs to go? Okay, who else needs to go? All right. Okay. Dark Reaper Assassins. Yeah, we gotta send you to the re-education camp. Okay, Epitsburg. Somebody needs to get the white supremacists out of here. Where's Kirkham Down Stalin, man? We got straight up white supremacists up in here. What the hell? What the hell? Okay? What the hell? We got straight up white supremacists up in here. This should not be allowed. This is a racist free zone, fascist free zone. You know what I'm saying? This is not for y'all to allow your stupid shit to get off. Y'all have whole ecosystems to exist in, and yet y'all come around here. Okay? All right, we have to send our whelpers to the gulag. He's got to go. Who else needs to go, man? We sending all of y'all. If you want to go to the gulag, say, hey. If you want to go to the gulag, just say hi. Say hi, and I'll send you right now. All right? All right, Meatwad going to the gulag. May Yonk, yeah, he's going on timeout. He's going to the re-education camp. Anybody else? Okay? All right, we're sending people out to the gulag. Yes. All right. All right, we're sending people out of here very easily, sending them all out, just very easy. Okay? So Sean Leslie says, should I leave the tent? No, you can stay just as long as you engage with the text. We're here to read and learn together in our book club. If not, get out of here. All right? Jim West, yeah, you got to go to the re-education camp. Don't come around here no more, bitch. Okay? Where are the commissars at? Do I need somebody to be a commissar today? Does somebody want to be a commissar, a.k.a. a moderator? If you want to be it and you want to start spanking motherfuckers, now is the day, because the white supremacists are out of their cage. They are out of their cage. Daniel says hello. Yeah, Daniel's got to go. Daniel said hello and goodbye at the same damn time. Okay? No, none of that. Continuing here. Between this holiday introduction and the next stages of the proceedings, when blood began to flow, a curious episode intruded. The leaders of the Kronstadt left social revolutionaries noticed only after they arrived on Mars Field a colossal standard of the Central Committee of the Bolsheviks, which had appeared at the head of the procession after the stop at the palace of Kshetiskaya. Burning with party rivalry, they demanded its removal. The Bolsheviks refused. The social revolutionaries then announced they would withdraw entirely. However, none of the sailors or soldiers followed the leaders. The whole policy of the left social revolutionaries consisted of such capricious waverings, now comic and now tragic. At the corner of the Nevsky and Latiny, the rear guard of the demonstration was suddenly fired on, and several people were wounded. A more cruel fire occurred on the corner of the Latiny and Patamoynov Street. The leader of the Kronstadt men, Raskolnikov, tells how, like a sharp pain to the demonstrators, was their uncertainty where the enemy was, from what side he was shooting. The soldiers seized their rifles. Disorderly firing began in all directions. Several were killed and wounded. Only with great difficulty was order restored in the ranks. The procession again moved forward with music, but not a trace was left of its holiday spirit. There seemed to be a hidden enemy everywhere. Rifles no longer rested peacefully on the left shoulder, but were held ready for action. Shout out to Nelson Moreno up in the live stream. Okay. Nelson says, hey, Simon, I'm currently busy. I'm just here to say hello and ask if you're cool. No, I'm not cool, man. They got wild white supremacists running up in here. They got wild white supremacists and fascists running up in here. I need a moderator, aka a commissar, to start blocking and putting people on timeout. You know what I'm saying? Because this is distracting me from what I need to do, which is read the fucking text in a short enough time and also intersperse with commentary. Okay? This is the thing. This is the thing. Okay, so if anybody wants to be a moderator for this live stream to make sure the white supremacists have zero voice, please raise your hand. I'll ask you a preliminary question, and then maybe you might become a moderator. I have to make sure because I'm giving you extreme power. I'm giving you extreme power right here. Anyway, continuing here. So, all right, yeah, real American, he's got to go. See, shit like that, easy. They give their names away too. Okay? They give their names away too. It's like so easy just to block them, man. All right? See? It's so easy. We just get them out of here just like that, man. But I need y'all to be on it. Who wants to do it? Okay? Who wants to do it? Because I can do it. I can do it too. But it's going to take away time from commentary. All right? Continuing here. There were no few bloody encounters on that day in different parts of the town. A certain number of them were doubtless due to misunderstanding, confusion, stray shots, panic. Such tragic accidents are one of the inevitable overhead expenses of a revolution. Itself one of the overhead expenses of historic progress. But an element of bloody provocation was also indubitable in the July events. It was manifest in those very days and was subsequently confirmed, says Podolsky. When the demonstrating soldiers began to pass through the Nevsky and the surrounding sections inhabited for the most part by the bourgeoisie, ominous indications of a clash began to appear. Strange shots were fired. Nobody knew whence or by whom. The columns were seized at first with confusion, and then the least steady and self-restrained began to open an irregular fire. In the official Izvestia, the Menshevik Kotorovich described the firing upon one of the workers' columns in the following words. A crowd of 60,000 workers from many factories was marching along Sadovaya Street. As they were passing by a church, a bell tolled in the steeple, and as though at a signal, both rifle and machine gun fire was opened from the roofs of the houses. When the crowd of workers dashed to the other side of the street, shots also came from the roofs opposite. In those attics and roofs, where in February's Protopopov's pharaohs had posted themselves with machine guns, members of the officers' organizations were now at work. They were attempting, and not without success, by firing on the demonstrators to spread panic and produce clashes between the different military units participating. When the houses from which shots came were searched, machine gun nests were found, and sometimes also the gunners. So this is another thing Trotsky is saying. He's saying that the workers are demonstrating. They're trying to show that all power will be to the Soviets. The workers of Russia are making their claim that this provisional government, this executive committee, this bourgeois establishment that still remains from the February Revolution has to go. And so the bourgeois government is fighting back. They're sending their soldiers to go shoot at these soldiers and workers and sailors who are now marching on behalf of the Soviets and the workers, etc., etc. And they're getting shot upon. And I think this is another point. This is another reason to say that we need to propagandize to and co-opt the military, because when you're getting shot at, who do you want to be on your side? Do you want somebody who knows how to react when getting shot at and also knows how to shoot back? Or do you want people who have just been talking about Marxism, talking about revolution, but when it's time to actually, exchange fire, they don't know what to do, etc., etc. That's what I'm saying. So I think that's very, very important. Okay? All right. So let's send more people out to the gulag. Okay? Let's send more people out to the gulag as well. All right, more people going to the gulag. Shout out to Nelson Moreno up in the live stream, sending people out here. Have you reached the part with the Cossacks? Okay. Nelson Moreno says, have you passed them? Okay. So yeah, as far as the Cossacks have been appearing throughout the story. If we remember, the Cossacks were a part of the February Revolution. They helped the workers. They helped the women, actually, who started the revolution, be protected from the police and the military, etc., who were seeking to harm the workers, who were seeking to, overturn the establishment. So the Cossacks were actually revolutionary at some point. Then also they have been co-opted to be a part of the bourgeois government. So I don't know if there's a specific part about the Cossacks you want to talk about, but as it is right now, some of the Cossacks are defending the bourgeois government that's against the Soviets. So yeah, anybody else that needs to go to the gulag? Okay. Yeah, we have to send that guy to the gulag as well. Okay. Who else? Lester Olivero is up in the live stream. Shout out to him. I think he's safe. I think he's a good guy. Okay. Shout out to everybody else. Okay. Nelson says, you're reading past them. By coincidence, I'm reading a different book that is longer. That is a longer version of this. What is a longer version of the history of the Russian Revolution that's not Trotsky's? Is there one that's like 7 volumes? Jesus Christ. Because this book is already going to take like 2 months to get through. Okay? Mike Oxmal says, ever read Dr. Zhivago? It's fiction, but good viewpoint on the Bolshevik Revolution. Why would I read fiction about the Bolshevik Revolution when I could read the actual account of somebody who was there? I'm not interested in bourgeois fiction, okay? I'm not interested in bourgeois fiction. Shout out to Cricket Lover up in the live stream, up in the chat as well. And Mike Oxmal says, it was just a question. I'm not offended by your question. I just think, I'm here to learn about history. You know what I'm saying? Because a fictional book could be just anything. Trotsky was there. Trotsky was actually there. Okay, Jesus, okay. Nelson, please continue to block the white supremacists. Anybody in here who's talking about something else other than the book or anything else that's non-revolutionary, okay? We have to send them to the gulag. For example, someone asked if I read the Bible. He can read the Bible in the re-education camp, okay? Simon J1 has to go read the Bible in the re-education camp, okay? He is out of here. Easy. Okay? All right. Continuing here. The chief instigators of the bloodshed, however, were the government troops, powerless to put down the movement, but adequate for purposes of provocation. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, when the demonstration was in full swing, Two Cossack squadrons with flying artillery rode up as a guard for the Tauride Palace. On the way, they stubbornly refused to enter into conversation with the demonstrators, in itself a bad sign. These Cossacks seized armored automobiles wherever they could and disarmed individual small groups. Cossack weapons on streets occupied by workers and soldiers seemed an intolerable challenge. Everything pointed to a clash. Near the Latiny Bridge, the Cossacks drew near to a compact mass of the enemy, who had here on the road to the Tauride succeeded in throwing up some sort of barrier. There was a moment of ominous silence broken by shots from neighboring houses. Then the fight began. The Cossacks used up cartridges by the box, writes the worker Metalev. The workers and soldiers scattering to shelter, or simply lying down on the sidewalk under fire, replied in the same fashion. The soldiers' fire compelled the Cossacks to retreat. Having fought their way through to the quay along the Neva, they fired 3 volleys from cannon. The cannon shots are also remarked upon by Izvestia, but under the long-range rifle fire they retired in the direction of the Tauride Palace. Running into another workers' column, the Cossacks received a decisive blow. Abandoning their cannons, horses, rifles, they sought shelter in the entrance of bourgeois houses, or dispersed altogether. So, once again, the Cossacks appeared. So, Nelson, if you're talking about the Cossacks, yeah, they're counter-revolutionary. The Cossacks, at this point in the story, you know, it's interesting. When they first appeared, they were helping the workers. Now it looks like they're working for the establishment to fight against the Soviet Revolution. Okay? So, Nelson says he's got to go. Salute to Nelson, top commissar. That's my guy. Okay? And shout out to Nelson also for dealing with some people in the chat. Okay? Cricket Lover is not really getting it, so Cricket Lover, you got to go to the re-education camp. You got to go to the re-education camp. Okay? Let's go. Let's continue here. The encounter on Latiny, an actual small battle, was the biggest military episode of the July days, and stories about it are to be found in the recollections of many demonstrators. Burson, a worker of the Ericsson factory, which came out with the machine gunners, tells how upon meeting them, the Cossacks immediately opened fire with their rifles. Many workers were left lying dead, and it was here that I was struck by a bullet, which passed through one leg and stopped in the other. As a memento of the July days, I have my crutch and my useless leg. Damn. In the encounter on the Latiny, 7 Cossacks were killed and 19 wounded or knocked out by shell explosions. Among the demonstrators, 6 were killed and about 20 wounded. Here and there lay the dead bodies of horses. You know, I'm here in Budapest, Hungary right now, and this paragraph, along with the last chapter that we read, really reminds me, or really makes me think about, you know, who are the people in this story. I use a lot of the public transport here in Budapest because it's perfect. Like, you can get anywhere in the city pretty much in 30 minutes, even if it's far on the outskirts, you know what I'm saying? So while on the bus today, you know, I went out to this district that's like a warehouse district, right? And the people that were getting on the bus were like, you know, old Hungarians. They looked like they were in their 50s, 60s, some were even in their 70s, still working, you know what I'm saying? And their skin is all deteriorated, you know, they have the faces, you know, when you meet somebody and they have the face of a hard life, you know what I'm saying? That's what I saw in these people's faces. And that's what I imagine the Russian revolutionary was like. Like, the Russian revolutionary at this time was a guy who probably was maybe illiterate or had worked all his life and never got the chance to exercise his mind or anything like that. Rough hands, rough skin, rough faces of hard life and hard living. And here these people are. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. The least among Russian society are taking a stand and willing to fight and die in the streets to have a better life for not only themselves, but their children and other people's children, to create a better fucking world, man. And, you know, when I was on the bus today looking at the faces of these, you know, basically poor white people, you know, Europe's version of poor white trash, I just felt like, damn, you know, like in a lot of ways, how socialism fell in Eastern Europe makes me feel like these people are now just left in the back of the bus. In the back of the bus. You know what I'm saying? It was a very interesting moment I had today, and that story I just told had nothing really to do with that exact paragraph because Trotsky's just doing an action scene where, guns are being fired, bullets are whizzing past people, etc., etc. But I was just thinking about the people that are doing this. You know what I'm saying? I don't have like an idealized version of these people in my mind. It's like what I see when I walk outside in Hungary, here in Budapest. The people that are digging through the trash can. The people that are, standing in line to like recycle old bottles. You know what I'm saying? And half of the bottles that they are putting in, 90% of the bottles that they're putting in are straight up beer bottles and wine bottles, et cetera, because all they can do is just drink their sorrows away. You know what I'm saying? It's a very sad thing. It's a very sad thing, okay? So, I'll continue here. All right. We got to put some people in the re-education camp or the gulag, okay? All right. Okay. So, the demon from Carino says, you said why read other versions of Trotsky if you're getting it from Trotsky? Trotsky is valuable, of course, but he wasn't a historian, and there's writers who have more information since then. I would argue, the demon from Carino, first and foremost, that Trotsky's account is valuable because Trotsky, first and foremost, has been disregarded in a lot of Marxist circles. A lot of traditional MLs, which I define myself as, I don't consider myself a Trotskyist because I do believe Trotsky's vision of permanent revolution is too dependent on Europeans actually embracing socialism rather than what history has shown that the global South, the melanated peoples of the earth, the people that are most oppressed by neocolonialism have been the ones to embrace socialism. So I'm not a Trotskyist. So first and foremost, I'm reading Trotsky's text because I think it's vitally important for us MLs to actually engage with Trotsky's work because I do think there is merit in there. He was a astounding intellectual, as I have seen firsthand from his own writing. You know what I'm saying? Granted, it's translated into English from Max Eastman, but I do believe he was a highly intelligent man, a man whose intellect I greatly respect. So that's first and foremost. Second, the book that was recommended before in the live stream, The Demon from Carino, is a fictional account. And most likely, fictional accounts of the Russian Revolution that are written in English are going to be coming from bourgeois perspectives. They're going to be coming from liberal perspectives. And I am not interested in engaging in more liberal propaganda. I've had a lifetime of that. I've had a lifetime. If you grow up in America and you're not generally all of us are, imbibed with liberalism. We're dunked in liberalism in its truest essence, lowercase liberalism. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think, I don't need to engage with a fictional story of the Russian Revolution with that. Secondly, even if you want to claim Trotsky was not a historian, which I don't, if I remember right, Trotsky himself doesn't exactly say he's a historian, but he is an avowed Marxist. And I do think that a Marxist perspective on this is much more interesting than reading it from bourgeois intellectuals who probably weren't there and probably are not privy to the information. Either they don't speak Russian or because they, have a hatred against the Russian Revolution. So those are generally my three reasons. I probably could think of more, but that's why we are reading Trotsky's text and why I probably won't be reading other books related to the Russian Revolution on live stream for some time, because this one is so long. It's 3 volumes worth of it. You know what I'm saying? We have to send earache out of here. Earache, yeah, gotta go. Go to the gulag. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here, okay? Man, I miss my guy Nelson, man. I miss my guy Nelson. All right? Not from the authors who claim they are liberals or bourgeoisie. So the demon from Carino, okay, I understand what you're saying, the demon from Carino, but did you understand my point? If you understand my point, reply yes. If not, I'm just going to ignore you. Because do you understand my 3 points? I laid them out very succinctly for you. I even gave you the courtesy of really dealing with that. Because I do think maybe you're a person who is here to engage intellectually with the text or with Trotsky's work, but if not, boy, you gotta go. I will quickly send you out of here. But if you understand my 3 reasons, say yes. Say yes. But if not, I will instantly boot you. It's not a problem for me. Okay? I did address your point. The demon from Carino, he just wants to argue. I did address your point. Okay? And by the way, how would I know if the author was liberal or bourgeois just from you putting it in the description? Okay? Number 1, this is a long-ass book that's highly cited that's highly cited by most leftists and Marxists as probably the definitive story on the Russian Revolution. So, you know what I'm saying? That's like saying, I read the Bible. Why do I need to read the commentary of Saint Augustus, of Hippo, whatever his name was. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot that we should be reading on this channel. This is one of the many books. I'm taking Trotsky's word for it because he was there, and he's using historical materialism to analyze and explain the events of the Russian Revolution. Okay? So, with all due respect, Demon from Carino, I believe we dealt with that. Okay? Shout out to Salim up in the chat. Hopefully he stays for more of Trotsky. So, continuing here. We have an interesting testimony from the opposing camp. That same Ensign Averin, who in the morning had made guerrilla attacks on the regular troops of the mutineers, writes as follows. At 8 o'clock in the evening, we received an order from General Polovtsev to go out in 2 companies with 2 field guns to the Tauride Palace. We got as far as the Litani Bridge, upon which I saw armed workers, soldiers, and sailors. With my advanced detachment, I approached them and asked them to surrender their weapons, but my request was not granted, and the whole gang turned and ran across the bridge to the Viborg side. I had not yet started after them when a small-sized soldier without shoulder straps turned around and fired at me, but missed. That shot served as a signal, and an irregular rifle fire was opened on us from all sides. The crowd sent up a shout. The Cossacks are shooting at us. And that was the fact. The Cossacks slid from their horses and began to shoot. They even attempted to open fire with cannon, but the soldiers let go such a hurricane of rifle fire that the Cossacks were compelled to retreat and scatter through the town. It is not at all impossible that some soldier shot at the ensign. A Cossack officer could better expect a bullet than a greeting from that July crowd. But it is easier to believe the abundant testimony to the fact that the first shots came not from the streets, but from ambush. A rank-and-file Cossack from the same squadron as the ensign has testified with conviction that the Cossacks were shot at from the direction of the district court, and afterward from other houses in Samursky Alley and on the Litani. In the official organ of the Soviet, it was related that the Cossacks, before arriving at the Litani Bridge, were fired on with machine guns from a stone house. The worker Medalev asserts that when the soldiers searched that house, they found in the apartment of a general who lived there a store of firearms, including 2 machine guns with cartridges. There is nothing unlikely in that. By hook or crook, quantities of all kinds of weapons have been accumulated in the hands of the commanding staff during the war period, and the temptation to sprinkle the rabble with a hail of lead from above must have been great. To be sure, shots did fall among the Cossacks, but there was a conviction among the July crowds that counter-revolutionists were consciously shooting at the government troops in order to incite them to ruthless action. Officers who only yesterday possessed unlimited powers recognize no limits to trickery and cruelty when the civil war comes. Petrograd was swarming with secret and semi-secret officer organizations, enjoying lofty protection and generous support. In a confidential report made by the Menshevik Liber, also a month before the July days, it was asserted that the officer conspirators were in touch with the Buchanan. Yes, and how could the diplomats of the Entente help trying to promote the speedy establishment of a strong power in Russia? So what I'm getting from that is that, once again, the police tactics have not really changed. Most of the time in a protest, especially a radical protest, the police are going to be the ones to instigate violence. They're the ones shooting, rubber bullets into people's eyes, blinding them. They're the ones tear gassing women and children who are coming out to peacefully assemble, etc., etc. And then the story the next day in the media is that a violent mob attacks police, deadly force had to be used, etc., etc. So the war is on 2 fronts. There is not a war against police men and women. There is a war against the institution of police under liberal dictatorship, bourgeois dictatorship. There is a war against that. And then the war is also in the media. This is why it's very important for us to create our own propaganda arms, our own newspapers, YouTube channels, TikToks, etc., right, to counter the propaganda that will come from the from the right wing when we are in conflict with them. But what do you think? Do you think it's important for us to counteract the right-wing propaganda, or do you think that, you know, the truth will eventually come out? Because Trotsky ended up writing it in his book, and anybody who's been involved in protests realizes that police are the ones who start to instigate shit. Whether it be from the outside, externally, like literally shooting, you know, rubber bullets into people's eyes, or you know, police have been caught infiltrating protests, sending people out there to be the instigators with inside the protesting group. Okay? Shout out to Bakalu Baka up in the live stream. Shout out to Ek Dem up in the live stream asking stupid questions. Okay? And no. Do I live in America? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay? So, shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Let me check the horizontal live stream to see if anybody's in here. Okay, no comments in the horizontal live stream, though votes in the polls. Okay, Original Mean Girl says, I think civilians should wear their own body cams. I like that idea too. Because that could be used as propaganda as well. Like, we show the people, see how brutal the police are, see how brutal this institution is. To some degree, we already have like surveillance of that because everybody's got a cell phone. If you go out to a protest, most of the time people are making their own reels and TikToks and videos and clips and shit like that. But yeah, why not? I mean, Google Glass is about to drop. You know, and within capitalism, it creates its own means for its own destruction. So let's see what Google Glass does when it's time for us to hit the streets again because another innocent black boy or another ICE officer, domed somebody. You know what I mean? Let's say when another innocent black child gets murdered by the police, or when ICE or border enforcement, murders another U.S. citizen. Let's have the Google Glass on as we confront the police. Okay. Shout out to, all right, I don't know what that person is saying, but shout out to Thema up in the live stream. I'm not here to do shout outs. I'm here to read Trotsky. If you are not here to read Trotsky, I will send you to a place where you can read something. It's called the re-education camp. You will get out of here very quickly. Okay. So if you want to leave the live stream, say hi. Say hi in the live stream and I will help you leave. I'll do a magic trick. You want to see a magic trick? Just say hi. Say hi very quickly. All right. In all excesses, the liberals and compromisers will see the hand of anarcho-Bolsheviks and German agents. The workers and soldiers, on the other hand, confidently laid the responsibility for the July clashes and victims upon patriotic provocateurs. Which side was right? The judgment of the masses is, of course, not infallible, but it is a crude mistake to imagine that the mass is blind and credulous. Where it is touched to the quick, it gathers facts and conjectures with 1,000 eyes and ears. Tests rumors by its own experience. Selects some and rejects others. Where versions touching a mass movement are contradictory, those appropriated by the mass itself are nearest to the truth. It is for this reason that international sycophants of the type of Hippolyte Taine, who in studying great popular movements ignore the voices of the street and spend their time carefully collecting and sifting the empty gossip produced in drawing rooms by moods of isolation and fear, are so useless to science. I know the guy, what's his name? The demon from Carino is not here anymore. The demon from Carino is not listening, but Trotsky just answered you with that paragraph. Basically, he's saying people that, look at revolutions from afar by looking at, text or reading newspaper articles from bourgeois sources and stuff like that, generally are pretty fucking useless when analyzing a revolution. Which is why, once again, Trotsky's work is probably the most valuable, or one of the most valuable accounts of the Russian Revolution, because he was literally in the fucking streets with the people. That's what he's saying right here. All right? So, shout out to everybody else up in the live stream. I need a commissar right now. Does anybody want to be a commissar? We got Bakulu Baka up in the live stream, Original Mean Girl. If any of you want to help me maintain this live stream away from fascists and white supremacists, if you want to help me, please say something, okay? Because I will give you the power. But after you go through a quick test, okay? Continuing here. The demonstrators again besieged the Tauride Palace and demanded their answer. At the moment the Kronstadt men arrived, some group or other brought Chernov out to them. Sensing the mood of the crowd, the word-loving minister pronounced upon this one occasion a very brief speech. Sliding over the crisis and the problem of power, he referred scornfully to the cadets who had withdrawn from the government. "Good riddance," he cried. Shouts interrupted him. "Then why didn't you say so before?" Milikov even relates how a husky worker, shaking his fist in the face of the minister, shouted ferociously, "Take the power, you son of a bitch, when they give it to you." Even though nothing more than an anecdote, this expresses with crude accuracy the essence of the July situation. Chernov's answers have no interest in any case. They did not win him the hearts of the Kronstadters. In just 2 or 3 minutes, someone ran into the hall where the executive committee was sitting and yelled that the sailors had arrested Chernov and were going to end him. With indescribable excitement, the executive committee delegated several of its prominent members, exclusively internationalists and Bolsheviks, to rescue the minister. Chernov testified subsequently before a government commission that he was descending from the tribune. As he was descending from the tribune, he noticed in the entrance behind the columns a hostile movement of several people. They surrounded me and would not let me through to the door. A suspicious-looking person in command of the sailors who were holding me back kept pointing to an automobile standing near. At that moment, Trotsky, emerging from the Tarai Palace, came up and mounting on the front of the automobile in which I found myself, made a short speech, proposing that Chernov be released. Trotsky asked all those opposed to raise their hands. Not one hand was raised. The group which had conducted me to the automobile then stepped aside with a disgruntled look. Trotsky, as I remember, said, "Citizen Chernov, nobody is hindering you from going back." The general picture of this whole episode leaves no doubt in my mind that there was here a planned attempt of dark elements acting over the heads of the general mass of the workers and soldiers to call me out and arrest me. So Trotsky essentially saved a liberal's life, which is pretty funny. So this guy, Chernov, he is essentially like the leader who's a left-wing leader. He's essentially a liberal, right? And the Soviets have had enough. Once again, it's July in Russia. It's hot. I know some people don't think it gets hot in Russia, but it does get hot. These people are angry and agitated, and they want the Soviets to have power. So they're looking at their liberal leader, Chernov. They grab him by the collar, and they're yelling at him, "Take the power, you son of a bitch. Take the power if you have it." And isn't this how we feel about, all of the Democrats right now? Isn't this how we feel as they sit by helplessly and watch Trump wage an illegal war in Iran where children die in schools, where he sends more and more money to Israel to slaughter the women and children and young men of Gaza as well? Isn't this what we want the Democrats to do, to actually seize fucking power? Because what do the Republicans do when they're a minority? They make sure that their agenda gets pushed through. And then what do Democrats do? They say, it's not a part of the procedure. We can't do it. It's not procedural. Anyway, I digress. All right. Shout out to Original Mean Girl. Okay. Shout out to Original Mean Girl. Patrick, man, says, are you a Tupac fan? Absolutely. Pac is my favorite rapper. That is my only side question I will answer. Okay. All right. I'm going to send this guy out of here. Okay. Okay, shout out to all the other people up in here making racist assumptions that I am somehow a gang member because I'm wearing a bandana. Is this not white supremacy? Is this not racism in full view? You see a black man wearing a bandana, not because it's hot, not because I just shaved and I got cuts. It's because somehow I am a gang member, okay? Nobody cares that After Hours Music Official is single. We don't care. Get the fuck out of here. All of you can get out of here, okay? All right. Yeah. Original Mean Girl. Do you want to be a commissar? Do you want to be a commissar? I will give you the power because this is stopping me from doing what I need to do, which is reading and giving commentary and talking to the people that actually want to engage. If you want to be a commissar, I just want to ask you this question. What are your 3 favorite Marxist texts you've ever read? Or what do you think are the 3 essential leftist texts that all of us should be reading? Okay? If you can answer that, I'll give you the power. I'll tell if you're genuine or not, if you just AI'd it or whatever. But that's the filter. You know what I'm saying? That's the filter. Okay? All right, I'm going to continue here. A week before his own arrest, Trotsky stated at a joint session of the executive committees, "These facts are going into history, and we will try to establish them as they were. I saw that a bunch of thugs was standing around the entrance. I said to Lunacharsky and Ryazanov that those were Okhranic, and they were trying to break into the Tauride Palace." Lunacharsky from his seat, "That's correct. I would know them," I said, in a crowd of 10,000. In his testimony of July 24th, Trotsky, already in solitary confinement in Kronstadt prison, wrote, "I was first minded to ride out of the crowd in the automobile along with Chernov and those who wanted to arrest him, in order to avoid conflict and panic in the crowd. But Midshipman Raskolnikov, running up in extreme excitement, called to me, 'That is impossible. If you ride away with Chernov, they will say tomorrow that the Kronstadters arrested him. Chernov must be freed immediately.' As soon as the trumpeter had summoned the crowd to silence and given me a chance to make a short speech which ended the question, those here in favor of violence raised their hands. Chernov found it possible to go back immediately into the palace without hindrance. The testimony of these two witnesses, who were at the same time the chief participants in the adventure, exhaust the factual side of it. But that did not in the least hinder the press hostile to the Bolsheviks from presenting the Chernov incident, together with the attempt at an arrest of Kerensky, as the most convincing of proofs that an armed insurrection had been organized by the Bolsheviks. There was no lack of allusion also, especially in oral agitation, to the fact that Trotsky had directed the arrest of Chernov. That version even arrived at the Tauride Palace. Chernov himself, who described the circumstances of his half-hour arrest with sufficient accuracy in a secret document addressed to a commission of inquiry, nevertheless refrained from making any public statement in order not to hinder his party from creating indignation against the Bolsheviks. Moreover, Chernov was a member of the government that put Trotsky in prison. The compromisers, to be sure, might have remarked that a gang of dark conspirators would never have ventured upon so insolent a plot as to arrest a minister in the middle of a crowd in broad daylight, had they not hoped that the hostility of the mass to the victim would be a sufficient protection. Such, indeed, to a certain degree it was. Nobody around the automobile made of his own accord the slightest attempt to liberate Chernov. If, to supplement this, somebody had somewhere arrested Kerensky, of course neither the workers nor soldiers would have grieved about that either. In this sense, the moral sympathy of the masses for actual and imaginary attempts against the socialist ministers did exist and give support to the accusations against the Kronstadters. But the compromisers were hindered from drawing this candid conclusion by their worry about the relics of their democratic prestige. While fencing themselves off with hostility from the demonstrators, they continued nevertheless to be heads of the system of workers, soldiers, and peasants, Soviets in the besieged Tauride Palace. So what Trotsky is essentially saying here is that he saved this man's life. This guy Chernov, he was like, let's say, a Democrat in our time, and he got arrested by the wild leftists, the wild radicals who were running out in the streets and saying, why don't you guys actually do something? Like how we want to do with the Democrats right now. We want to grab Hakeem Jeffries around the collar and say, do something, bitch. Do something. Smack, smack, smack. We want to do something to the Democrats. And here, Trotsky actually saved this motherfucker's life. Because Chernov, he got caught. He was in traffic lacking. And so what did Trotsky do? Trotsky put him back in his car and said, listen, you can go. You're free. And what did Chernov do? What did Chernov do? This fat bitch Chernov went off and said, they tried to kill me. They tried to fucking kill me. And Trotsky was the leader of the gang. He was going to let them kill me. I don't know how I escaped. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Ain't that something? And on top of that, Chernov put Trotsky in prison. And Trotsky let him live. Mercy. Mercy. And somebody says that communists are heartless. Somebody says that communists are heartless, man. When our heart bleeds on the left, it pumps pure red and it bleeds on the left, man. Come on now. That's crazy. That's crazy. Can't get along with liberals, that's for sure. Can't get along with liberals. Anyway, I'm joking. Anyway, at 8 o'clock in the evening, General Polovtsev revived the hopes of the executive committee by telephone. 2 Cossack squadrons with flying artillery are on the way to the Tauride Palace at last. But this time, too, their expectations were disappointed. Telephone calls in all directions only deepened their panic. The Cossacks had disappeared as though by evaporation, and their horses, saddles, and flying artillery with them. Milikov writes that toward evening there appeared the first results of the governmental appeal to the troops. Thus, he adds, the 176th Regiment was said to be hastening to the Tauride Palace. This remark, which sounds so accurate, is curiously characteristic of those quid pro quos which inevitably arise in the first period of a civil war, when the two camps are still only beginning to divide. A regiment did actually arrive at the Tauride Palace in campaign array, knapsack and folded coats on their backs, canteens and kettles at their belts. The soldiers had got wet through on the way and were tired, and they had come from Krasno Selo. It was, too, the 176th Regiment, but they had no intention whatever of rescuing the government. Affiliated with the Mezharansty, this regiment had come out under the leadership of two soldier Bolsheviks, Levinson and Medvedev, to win the power for the Soviets. It was immediately reported to the leaders of the executive committee, sitting, so to speak, on pins and needles, that a regiment in campaign array had arrived from a distance with its officers, and was settling down to a well-earned rest beneath the windows of the palace. Dan, dressed in the uniform of a military physician, went to the commanders with the request that he supply sentries for the defense of the palace. The sentries were soon actually supplied. Dan, we may imagine, communicated this fact with satisfaction to the Presidium, and from that source it arrived in the newspapers. Sukhanov, in his notes, makes fun of the submissiveness with which a Bolshevik regiment fulfilled the directions of a Menshevik leader. A further proof, he thinks, of the absurdity of the July demonstration. In reality, the matter was both simpler and more complex. Having received the request for sentries, the commanders of the regiment turned to an assistant commandant on duty in the palace, the young Lieutenant Pigorovsky. By good or bad luck, Pigorovsky was a Bolshevik, a member of the Mezharani organization, and he immediately turned for advice to Trotsky, who was occupying a point of observation with a small group of Bolsheviks in one of the side rooms of the palace. It goes without saying that Pigorovsky was advised to post the sentries immediately. Far better to have friends than enemies at the entrances and exits of the palace. Thus it happened that the 176th Regiment, having come out for a demonstration against the government, defended the government against demonstrators. If it had really been a question of insurrection, Lieutenant Pigorovsky, with 4 soldiers at his back, could easily have arrested the whole executive committee. But nobody thought of arresting anybody. The soldiers of the Bolshevik regiments conscientiously fulfilled their duties as sentries. Very interesting. So Trotsky is essentially saying here, like, the soldiers who were supposed to come and put down this demonstration ended up turning coat and joining the Bolsheviks. And that was because primarily their leader was a Bolshevik and he was going to disregard the orders that the government had sent down anyway. Once again, showing we need to, co-opt the military. Going back to the arrest of a sitting politician, Chernov. What do we think about that? Is that a proper military, or not military, revolutionary strategy? Kidnapping, or not kidnapping, citizen arresting fascists, liberals, white supremacists in power. That was done in Italy during the years of lead. The leftist guerrillas there in Italy, I believe in the 60s and 70s, would regularly kidnap fascists who were in the government or in business. In East Germany as well, there was a group called the Red Army or something like that that would regularly, kidnap fascists as well. Should this or arrest them? Because, they're breaking our laws. You know what I'm saying? We're creating the new system, so they're breaking our laws. What do we think about that? Is this a good revolutionary strategy? What do you think about that? Holding them for ransom, trying to get re-educate them. Possibly we could turn them, like Patty Hearst and the Symbian Army. You know what I'm saying? Is it possible to make Patty Hearst out of Steve Miller? If we captured Steve Bannon, could we make him Patty Hearst? Is that possible? What do y'all think, man? Let me know in the chat. Could we make Patty Hearst out of Kylie McEnany, whatever her name is. You know what I'm saying? Can we make Patty Hearst out of Candace Owens? Yes. Tell me. Anyway, sorry. Continuing here. After the Cossack squadrons, who were the sole obstacle on the road to the Tauride Palace, had been swept away, it seemed to many demonstrators that victory was assured. In reality, the chief obstacle was sitting in the very palace itself. At the joint session of the executive committees, which had begun at 6 o'clock in the evening, there were present 90 representatives from 54 shops and factories. The 5 orators who were given the floor by agreement began by protesting against the denunciation of the demonstrators as counter-revolutionists in the manifestos of the executive committee. You see what is written on our standards, said one. Such are the decisions adopted by the workers. We demand the resignation of the 10-minister capitalist. We have confidence in the Soviet, but not in those in whom the Soviet has confidence. We demand that the land be seized immediately, that control of industry be established immediately. We demand a struggle against the famine which threatens us. Another added, this is not a meeting, but a fully organized manifestation. We demand the transfer of the land to the peasants. We demand an annulment of the order directed against the Revolutionary Army. At this time, when the cadets have refused to work with you, we ask you with whom further you want to dicker. We demand that the power pass to the Soviets. The propaganda slogans of the manifestation of June 18th had now become an armed ultimatum of the masses. But the compromisers were still bound with 2 heavy chains to the chariot of the possessing classes. Power to the Soviets, but that means, first of all, a bold policy of peace, a break with the Allies, a break with our own bourgeoisie, complete isolation, and, in the course of a few weeks, ruin. No, a responsible democracy will not enter on the path of adventurism. The present circumstances, said Tsetserelli, make it impossible in the Petrograd atmosphere to carry out any new decisions whatever. It remains, therefore, to recognize the government with the staff it has left, to call an extraordinary session of the Soviets in 2 weeks in a place where it may be able to work without interference, best of all in Moscow. So, essentially, the government is saying, like, yeah, we're all for this revolution, but we're not about that revolution. I mean, we like revolution, but not what y'all are up to. You get what I'm saying? So, the government, the bourgeois government, was also co-opting the language of the revolution. And isn't that just the most frustrating thing? Isn't that the most annoying thing when you hear right-wingers repeat, I have a dream that one day all men and women will be treated equal in America? That a young black boy and young white boys can lay down in the hills of Georgia? Doesn't that bother you the fuck? That bothers me so much when right-wingers start repeating Martin Luther King, or even bringing up Malcolm X or anything like that. You get what I'm saying? And it's so annoying because that's what the counter-revolutionaries, the Mensheviks, social revolutionaries, the people in the bourgeois government were essentially doing. They were saying, yeah, we're all about revolution. We want all power to the Soviets, but not those Soviets. We want the land back for us. For us. Let the smart people, let the rich people have power again. You know? Anyway, what's the most annoying co-optation of left-wing rhetoric that the right has ever done? What is the most annoying thing? For example, right now in the UK, a bunch of white supremacists are marching and tearing up their own cities and own countries because they say that migrants are coming to bring crime. So you know what's right for us to do, white boys in England? Let's burn down our own cities because, yeah, anyway, they're taking a knee. I've heard that white supremacists in the UK are taking a knee for some Polish boy who got killed, unfortunately, by some Sikh man. And so, of course, when, non-black things happen, white people have to turn to us and start co-opting our methods of protesting. So now, white men who are right-wing and racist in the UK are taking a knee in memory of some Polish boy who was slaughtered by a Sikh man, and supposedly that's an attack on white men and Western civilization and all the other stupid shit fascists say, etc., etc. That's really annoying. Can you think of any other annoying things right-wingers do by co-opting from the left? Whether it be tactics, rhetoric, phrases, etc. I digress. Let's continue here. But the course of the meeting was continually interrupted. The Putilovsky were knocking at the door of the palace. They came up only toward evening, tired, irritated, in extreme excitement. Tsetserelli, we want Tsetserelli. This mass, 30,000 strong, sends its representatives into the palace, somebody shouting after them that if Tsetserelli won't come out of his own accord, they must bring him out. It is a long way from threat to action, but nevertheless the thing is taking a rough turn, and the Bolsheviks hasten to interfere. Zinoviev subsequently reported, our comrades proposed that I should go out to the Putolev men, a sea of heads such as I have never saw before. Tens of thousands of men were solidly packed together. The cries of Tsetserelli continued. I began, in place of Tsetserelli, it is I who have come out to you. Laughter. That changed the mood. I was able to make quite a long speech, and in conclusion I appealed to that audience to disperse peacefully at once, keeping perfect order, and under no circumstance permitting anyone to provoke them to any aggressive action. The assembled workers applauded stormily, formed in ranks, and began to disperse. This episode offers the best possible illustration of the keen discontent of the masses, their lack of any plan of attack, and the actual role of the Bolshevik Party in the July events. So, yeah, that just reminds me of how the right-wingers broke into the Capitol and they were screaming, hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence. And then they want to say it's not violent. Very annoying. But once again, that's practice for a real revolution. Right now, the right wing has been doing hella practice, running hella scrimmages for their version of a racist, fascist takeover of a state. What has the left been doing? This is what I'm saying. We have not been practicing enough. The left is AI. Practice? You talking about practice? Yes, we need to practice, nigga. Anyway, Kareth says, just hopped in, no Diddy, love the fit, woke, co-opting woke is horrible. Yes, I absolutely agree, Kareth. Co-opting woke has been absolutely horrendous. And white people use it all wrong, too. White people be looking at, like, I don't know, kombucha. White people say kombucha? That's so woke. Like, what the fuck? I hate that so much. And you know, a lot of the stuff that, like, at least in American context, that is like, you know, chants and slogans for, you know, a better world, you know what I'm saying? A lot of that comes from, like, Black America. It's so annoying that they be co-opting that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So annoying. Like, the day I see white men walking through the streets talking about hands up, don't shoot, or like how they're doing in the UK right now, I can't breathe. Like, absolutely horrendous. And they be doing it absolutely all wrong with no swag or anything like that. It's like how they first got hip-hop. You know, right now, white rappers are just now getting good. We're 50 years into hip-hop, and white rappers are just now getting good. It might take white folks 50 years to learn how to use the word woke right. God, that's so annoying. Kareth had a good point. He had a good point with that one, man. Anyway, I'll continue here. So, during the moments when Zinoviev was exchanging views with the Putolovsky outdoors, a large group of their delegates, some of them with rifles, burst stormily into the hall where the executive committees were in session. The members of the committees jumped up from their seats. Some of them did not reveal a sufficient courage and self-restraint, says Sukhanov, who has left a vivid description of this dramatic moment. One of the workers, a classic Sansolet in cap and short blouse, blue blouse. Okay, sorry, A classic Sansolet in cap and short blue blouse without belt, with a rifle in his hand, jumped up on the speaker's tribune, trembling with excitement and wrath. Comrades, how long are we workers going to stand for this treachery? You are making bargains with the bourgeoisie and the landlords. Here we are, 30,000 Putolovsky. We are going to have our will. Chedsy, before whose nose the rifle was dancing, showed great presence of mind. Calmly leaning down from his elevation, he thrust into the quivering hand of the worker a printed manifesto. Here, comrade, take this, please, and I ask you to read it. It says here what the Putolov comrades should do. In the manifesto, it said nothing at all except that the demonstrators ought to go home, as otherwise they would be traitors to the revolution. And what else, indeed, was there left for the Mensheviks to say? Okay? So yeah, this is better than any fiction book. I know some of y'all want to come in here and derail the conversation by saying, hey man, why don't you read this fictional book about the Russian Revolution? And no, Kareth, I'm not talking about you. Kareth, I know you suggested a fictional book, but there was some other jackass that was in here earlier saying, hey, why don't you read this fictional book about the Russian Revolution? I mean, could it get more realer than that? The workers burst into the government house, put a gun to the face of the Speaker of the House, and said, we want to take power. Come on now, is that not inspiring? That's more inspiring than anything you could find in fiction. Because guess what? The truth is stranger in fiction. The truth is stranger than fiction. I mean. Anyway, yeah. Kareth says kombucha. Exactly. I tried kombucha for the first time a few days ago. Go check out that short on my channel talking about kombucha. Anyway. All right. Continuing here. If you've had kombucha, tell me what you think about it. That's our one side piece. Now that the chat has calmed down, we can finally have civil conversation. Okay. In the agitation under the walls of the Petrograd Palace, as everywhere in the agitational whirlwind of that period, a great place was occupied by Zinoviev, an orator of extraordinary power. His high tenor voice would surprise you at first, but afterward win you with its unique music. Zinoviev was born agitator. He knew how to infect himself with the mood of the masses, excite himself with their emotions, and find for their thoughts and feelings a somewhat prolix, perhaps, but very gripping expression. Enemies used to call Zinoviev the greatest demagogue among the Bolsheviks. This was their usual way of paying tribute to his strongest trait, his ability to penetrate the hearts of the demos and play upon his strings. It is impossible to deny, however, that being merely an agitator and neither a theoretician nor a revolutionary strategist, Zinoviev, when he was not restrained by an external discipline, easily slid down the path of demagogism, speaking not in the Philistine, but in the scientific sense of that word. That is, he showed an inclination to sacrifice enduring interest to the success of the moment. Zinoviev's agitatorial quick scent made him an extraordinarily valuable counselor whenever it was a question of estimating political conjectures, but nothing deeper than that. At meetings of the party, he was able to conquer, convince, bewitch whenever he came with a prepared political idea, tested in mass meetings and, so to speak, saturated with the hopes and hates of the workers and soldiers. On the other hand, Zinoviev was able, in a hostile meeting, even in the executive committee of those days, to give to the most extreme and explosive thoughts an enveloping and insinuating form, making his way into the minds of those who had met him with a preconceived distrust. In order to achieve these invaluable results, he had to have something more than a consciousness that he was right. He had to have a tranquilizing certainty that he was to be relieved of the political responsibility of a reliable and strong hand. Lenin gave him this certainty. Armed with a prepared strategic formula containing the very essence of a question, Zinoviev would adroitly and astutely supplement it with a fresh exclamation, protest, demands, just now caught up by him on the street, in the factory, or the barrack. In those moments, he was an ideal mechanism of transmission between Lenin and the masses, sometimes between the masses and Lenin. Zinoviev always followed his teacher, except in a very few cases. But the hour of disagreement was just that hour when the fate of the party, of the class, of the country was to be decided. The agitator of the revolution lacked revolutionary character. When it was a question of conquering minds and hearts, Zinoviev remained a tireless fighter, but he suddenly lost his fighting confidence when he came face to face with the necessity of action. Here he drew back from the masses, from Lenin too, responded only to voices of indecision, caught up every doubt, say nothing but obstacles. And then his insinuating, almost feminine voice, losing its conviction, would expose his inner weakness. Under the walls of the Petrograd Palace in the July days, Zinoviev was extraordinarily active, ingenious, and strong. He raised the excitement of the masses to its highest note, not in order to summon them to decisive action, but on the contrary, in order to restrain them. This corresponded to the moment and to the policy of the party. Zinoviev was wholly in his element. So, this is a question I have for the audience, and this goes back to the very first question I asked during the live stream today. As a party, if we are forming a vanguard revolutionary party, we're going to attract all types of people. And as people, we all have different strengths and weaknesses. We have certain toxic personality traits and we have positive personality traits. That goes for everybody. What do we do about allowing people into the party who might be non-fully educated or avowed socialists, right? You know what I'm saying? Like people who have an inkling of an idea, but they don't have the knowledge to explain it or have misgivings or maybe even, you know, liberal points of view. You know what I'm saying? They might consider themselves leftists, but they still might have reactionary liberal points of view. But they're great at, you know, rallying the people, communicating with the people, like the first guy that was mentioned in Trotsky's chapter today. Now we go to Zinoviev, who is an excellent public speaker, able to rally the masses and able to communicate so well, but, you know, he has some personality traits, even if he is, you know, a very enlightened and committed Marxist, like a very educated man when it comes to Marxism, Leninism, etc., etc. But he has a personality trait that allows his presence to sometimes hurt the party or hurt progress or hurt the movement. What do we think about that? I know that might be a convoluted question, but I guess essentially the question is, what's more important for party building? Is it knowledge, or is it personality traits that attract people, rile people up, organizational traits, etc., etc.? Is it actually knowledge about socialism, or is it actually being able to be a great organizer? You know what I mean? Being able to be a great soldier, being able to be a great leader, a great writer. You know what I'm saying? Should we value talents over just general knowledge? You get what I'm saying? Because this is the question that's been on my mind. Let me make sure the live stream is still running straight. Okay. Yeah. Let me make sure the live stream is still running. Okay, hold on. Quick check. Okay. Yes, it's still good. Okay. All right. I see. I haven't been able to see what y'all have been saying because the chat cut off. Okay. Yeah, a lot of y'all have to go. I haven't been seeing what y'all have been saying in the live stream chat because I paused a while ago. Okay? All right, we're going to knock out some people. Some of y'all got to go to the gulag right now. Okay? We have to send some people, to the gulag. I can't believe I let y'all get that far. Oh, man. Y'all are lucky I haven't been checking that chat. Oh, man, y'all are lucky. I've been letting y'all live. Okay? We putting all of y'all out in the gulag. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I missed a lot of commentary. All right? We putting a lot of y'all out. Okay? A lot of y'all out of here. Okay? I didn't see a lot of the comments. Okay? All right? A lot of y'all have to go. Okay? American voters are... Okay, Original Mean Girl... Okay, sorry, Original Mean Girl. Original Mean Girl was talking a lot, and I missed the comments. I didn't see the comments. Okay, now let's check some comments real quick. Okay, Original Mean Girl says, honestly, I went to Baptist school, and they don't allow this type of knowledge, but I do find this very interesting and have been self-educating with friends about these issues. Shout out to Original Mean Girl. I missed that. Yeah, anybody else? Okay, Christine Sherman, I did this. I don't know what you mean by I did this. FaZe says, how do you feel about Django Unchained and Wolfenstein? FaZe, man, you got to go on timeout. Sorry, I missed a lot of these comments. Jesus. I missed up. All right. Shout out to France up in the stream. He says the stream reached India. Shout out to the Indian Communist Party. They got 2 Marxist parties in India that are actually popping. I don't know which one is the right one. Okay? All right, we have to send some people out of here. Okay? Lord God said that's in Ireland. I don't know what you're talking about. Somebody said sleep. I'm going to put you to sleep and send you out of here. Okay? Okay? Let's put this person out of here too. Gulag. Okay? A lot of people got to go to the gulag. A lot of y'all. I don't know how I let y'all slip. I feel so bad. I feel so bad that I let y'all just get in here and just infiltrate all my precious time. Okay? Okay? Got to send all of y'all out of here. A lot of people got to go. A lot of people got to go. A lot of y'all are just going to the re-education camp because I'm merciful right now. But a lot of y'all I don't ever want to see your faces or names in here again, because y'all are disturbing the good people that are here for this book review. Okay? Y'all are disturbing the good people, and it's absolutely sickening. I hate you. I hate you with a full passion. Okay? Who else wants to go? If you want to leave, just say hi. If you want to leave, say hi. If you want to leave the live stream, say hi, and I will send you out of here forever. Okay? All right. France says, how's life in the U.S. right now? I am not in the U.S. I am not in the U.S. Okay? All right. Sorry I had to pause the live stream for all of my readers out there. All right. Going to the horizontal live stream, Kareth says, in response to your last question, the North Vietnamese use the Kem Thao system. Explain that, Kareth, because I forgot the question and I don't know what this answer is in relation to. I got distracted by the comment section. Okay? You're sending some people out of here. You're sending some people out of here forever. Okay? A lot of people are getting kicked out. Okay, I think I cleaned up the live stream. Sorry for anybody up in the live stream. Okay? Who was up in the live stream as well? Okay, sorry about that. Okay. All right. Let me take a water break. I've been on live almost 2 hours. No water. All right. Sorry I did not see the comments. I will be on top of the comments now, so if y'all keep talking, we're going to keep on blocking and sending y'all to the gulag and the re-education camp. And shout out to Kareth up in the live stream. Please explain your answer. In response to your last question, the North Vietnamese use the Kem Thao system. Okay. Continuing here. All right. Shout out to Ruchika Tania. I am from Louisiana. Monroe, Louisiana. All right. Continuing here. The battle on the Latini produced a sharp break in the development of the demonstration. Nobody was now watching the procession from window or balcony. The more well-to-do part of the public besieging the railroad stations were leaving town. The struggle in the streets turned into a scattered skirmishing without definite aim. During the night, there was hand-to-hand fights between demonstrators and patriots, unsystematic disarmings, transfers of rifles from one hand to another. Groups of soldiers from the dispersed regiments functioned helter-skelter. Shady elements and provocateurs attaching themselves to the soldiers incited them to anarchistic activities, adds Podolsky. On a hunt for those who had shot from the roofs, groups of sailors and soldiers carried out searches in the cellars. Here and there, under the pretext of a search, plunderings would occur. On the other side, deeds of a pogrom character were perpetrated. Merchants furiously attacked the workers in those parts of the town where they felt strong and ruthlessly beat them up. Says Afasaniev, a worker from the new Lesner factory, with cries of beat the Yids and Bolsheviks, drown them. The crowds attacked us and gave it to us good. One of the victims died in the hospital. Afanasiv himself was dragged by sailors, bruised and bloody, from the Ekaterinsky Canal. Okay? Shout out to, Ruchika Tania saying, I'm your new subscriber. How old are you? I'm 35 years old, man. All right. Kareth says, you asked methods for raising class consciousness, I believe. I mean, that's in the poll, but I don't know if that was the question about that spurred you to answer about Vietnam, for example. But I would ask you, I guess, what are the best ways to raise class consciousness? We have a follower from India here who is in the live stream now. Tell us, man from India, I'm asking you a direct question. Ruchika Taneja, tell us about the two Marxist parties of India. India has two major Marxist parties that gets hundreds of thousands of votes, and I believe one of the Marxist parties even have seats in the parliament, though being in houses of liberal power shouldn't be our benchmark for measuring the success of a socialist movement, but I digress. Tell us about the two Marxist parties in India, because I would like to know. How successful are they? What is their message? Which one is the revisionist party? Which one is the actual revolutionary party? There are two Indian parties who claim to be Marxist in India. Tell us about them, Ruchika Taneja. And anybody else who knows about them, please let us know. All right, continuing here. Skirmishes, victims, fruitlessness of the struggle, and indefiniteness of practical aim. That describes the movement. The Central Committee of the Bolsheviks passed a resolution to call on the workers and soldiers to end the demonstration. This time, that appeal, which was immediately brought to the attention of the Executive Committee, met hardly any opposition at all in the lower ranks. The masses ebbed back into the suburbs, and they cherished no intention of renewing the struggle on the following day. They felt that the problem of power to the Soviets was considerably more complicated than had appeared. So some of the people came out to support the Soviets in taking over the government, and then they realized, oh shit, this is actually pretty fucking real. I don't like getting shot at. I don't like getting chased by police, etc., etc. We still have quite a few more pages to go. I'm just checking ahead to estimate the time that we have on stream. I assume maybe another 40 minutes or so, because we got so blocked up with bad comments. We got blocked up by bad comments, and I actually do have a class I do need to get to. Let me make sure that I'm not going to be late for that class. Okay? So just give me a minute or so to check on that. All right? Hold on one second. Time in Chile now. Okay, yeah, I got about 20 minutes until my class, so we might go on pause for a bit as I take care of some work. The live stream will still be running. I'll just be in the other room teaching an English class. We'll come back on live and finish the book. But let's read a little bit more. Reacting to the comments, Kareth says, basically a system of relentless self-criticism. While technically applied to cadres operating in the field, I wonder if it might be of utility. Ah, yes. So the question was about how do we make sure people's personality traits that might be negative not affect party work or the movement. Yes. And what you answered, Kareth, is about the North Vietnamese using the Kim Thao system. I guess that's a self-criticism type of system. And yeah, self-criticism is a great way for us to make sure that, you know, we remain committed to elevating the working class and total revolution and getting rid of bourgeois domination in our society. So yeah, self-criticism is very important. I didn't think about that, even though I have heard of self-criticisms before. But Trotsky hasn't spoken about that. He's only speaking about revolutionary praxis out in the streets with the workers and stuff. Not so much the internal workings of the Bolsheviks. You know what I'm saying? But that's a very good point. That's a very good point. All right. Shout out to Travis Lundebi, who says, free Carmelo. Okay, if that's what you think. Okay. Anyway, the siege of the Tauride Palace was conclusively raised. The nearby streets stood empty, but the vigil of the executive committees continued, with intermissions, with long drawn-out speeches, meaningless and fruitless. Only afterward did it become clear that the compromisers were waiting for something. In neighboring rooms, the delegates of the factories and regiments were still languishing. It was already long after midnight, relates Metalev, and we were still waiting for a decision. Irritated with weariness and hunger, we were wandering through the Alexandrovsky Hall. At 4 o'clock in the morning on the 5th of July, our waiting came to an end. Through the open doors of the chief entrance to the palace burst in a noisy crowd of officers and soldiers. The whole building was filled with the brassy sounds of the Marseillaise. The trampling of feet and the thunder of the band at that hour before the dawn caused an extraordinary excitement in the session hall. The deputies leapt from their seats. A new danger, but Dan was in the tribune. Comrades, he shouted, don't get excited. There is no danger. Those are regiments loyal to the revolution that have arrived. Yes, the reliable troops had arrived at last. They occupied the corridors, viciously fell upon the new workers still remaining in the palace, grabbed the weapons of those having them, arrested them, and led them away. Lieutenant Kuchin, a well-known Menshevik, ascended the tribune in field uniform. The chairman, Dan, received him with open arms to the triumphal notes of the band. Choking with delight and scorching the lefts with their triumphant glances, the compromisers seized each other by the hand, opening their mouths wide, and poured out their enthusiasm in the notes of the Marseillaise. A classic picture of the beginning of a counter-revolution, angrily muttered Matov, who knew how to see and understand many things. The political meaning of this scene, recorded by Sukhanov, will become still more clear if you remember that Martov belonged to the same party with Dan, for whom it represented the highest triumph of the revolution. Okay? So yeah, Trotsky is then saying, once again, the bourgeois forces are continuing to show or try to make some effort to counter the mass action of the people. Once again, the Russian Revolution was not successful just because a bunch of people who said that they were smarter than everybody else thought of a great idea and then just manipulated and tricked people into overthrowing their government and installing them in power. No, no, no. At every single turn, the workers, the people in the street, the soldiers who were out in the battlefield said they had enough, and they decided en masse to push and struggle for a better society where they would have true democracy, not liberal, bourgeois, fake bullshit democracy, real democracy from the Soviets. All power to the Soviets. Only now, as they observed the joy of the majority bubbling like a fountain, did the left wing of the Soviet begin to understand in a downright way how isolated was this highest organ of the official democracy when the genuine democracy came into the streets. For 36 hours, these people have been alternately disappearing behind the scenes, running to a telephone booth to get in touch with headquarters or with Kerensky at the front, to demand troops, to appeal, to urge, to beseech, to dispatch agitators and ever more agitators, and again to come back and wait. The danger was past, but the fear retained its momentum. The tramping steps of the loyal at 5 o'clock in the morning therefore sounded to their ears like a symphony of liberation. At last, from the Tribune came frank speeches about the lucky putting down of an armed revolt and about the necessity of settling with the Bolsheviks this time for good. That detachment which entered the Tauride Palace had not come from the front, however, as many in the heat of the moment thought. It had been handpicked from the Petrograd garrison, chiefly from the three most backward guard battalions, the Perozovensky, the Semenovsky, and the Izmailovsky. On the 3rd of June, these regiments had declared themselves neutral, and vain efforts had been made to capture them with the authority of the government and the executive committee. The soldiers sat gloomily in their barracks waiting. Only in the afternoon of July 4th did the authorities at last discover an effective means of influencing them. They showed the Preobrazhensky documents demonstrating as plain as 2 + 2 = 4 that Lenin was a German spy. That moved them. The news flew around the regiments. Officers, members of the regimental committee, agitators of the executive committee were active everywhere. So basically, what Trotsky is saying here is that the government is trying to get its most backward, its most reactionary, its most redneck, three-tooth, far-right military forces to finally go against the Petrograd Soviet. And what do they essentially do? They say, we have proof that Lenin is trans. Think about it today. What would get right-wingers up and out of their seats? The only thing, it's not that, the government is bilking them out of money, raising their taxes while cutting taxes for the billionaires. Right-wingers don't give a fuck that, the government is polluting the air and the water and allowing children to die, not only in foreign lands like Iran and Gaza with our hard-earned tax dollars, but also in America as well, because we let the pipes be full of lead, etc., etc. Right-wingers don't give a fuck about none of that. They don't care that, little Timmy walked into school and sprayed everybody with an AR-15 he was able to buy last week because the right-wing administration of Kentucky said all you need is a heartbeat and be 18 to get a gun. Right-wingers don't care about that. You know what gets right-wingers up out of their seats? Tell them that a motherfucker is trans. Jesus Christ, you'll see them activated. You'll see them fucking activated. That was a trans man over there. So that's basically what they did. Because these were the most right-wing reactionary forces in Russia, what gets them is essentially what Nelson Moreno says, culture war stuff. Now, literally, they were fighting a war, against the Germans, but still... Still, the idea that Russia was being infiltrated by a German spy, and rumors are that he's Jewish. He's also Jewish, too. That's also going to be a reason to now fight for Mother Russia. Jesus Christ. Right-wingers, they have not changed. They have not changed. They've been the same. They've been the same for over 100 years, I swear. Shout out to Nelson Moreno. He joined the live stream. He says, I'm back. The government of the Tsar and its remnants were very far right. MAGA is basically just culture warriors. No class consciousness. No nothing. I want to ask you, Nelson, what could we do to raise class consciousness? What can we actually do? How can we raise class consciousness? Is it dressing in all red? Is it putting bad bitches behind me twerking while I read from Lenin and Trotsky? How can we raise class consciousness? What do you think, my guy? What do you think? Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So that moved them, the news of Lenin being a German spy. The news flew round the regiments. Officers, members of the regimental committee, agitators of the executive committee were active everywhere. The mood of the neutral battalions changed. By dawn, when there was no longer any need of them, it became possible to assemble them and lead them through the deserted streets to the empty Tauride Palace. The Marseillaise was played that night by the band of the Ismailovsky Regiment, the same reactionary regiment to which on December 3rd, 1905, had been entrusted the task of arresting the first Petrograd Soviet of Workers' deputies, in session with Trotsky in the chair. The blind director of the historic drama achieved striking theatrical effects at every step without striving after them. He simply gives a loose rein to the logic of events. Okay, so what we're going to do is pause right here. I'm going to leave the live stream running. Because I hate dividing the episodes into different parts. Maybe I should. I'm going to just cut this live stream off. I'm going to cut the vertical live stream off and do a part 2 for episode 25. Because, you know, sometimes people watch these shorter versions. I don't care, right? So there's going to be a part 2 to the vertical live stream. This will go off. The horizontal live stream will keep running. And we will pick up with Trotsky's history of the Russian Revolution again pretty soon, okay? Just give me an hour. I have one English class I have to teach with a guy in Chile. It's 10 p.m. Where I'm at, so, you know, it's about 4 his time. So I got to talk to my Chilean guy. I will be back for the second part of this chapter. Trust me, we will finish it today. Shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. There's too many people that joined for me actually to talk about them. Okay? So yeah, there's a lot to actually talk about. Okay? All right. Shout out to Dave Thomas who says prosecute Trump. I like that. Shout out to Ruhal Kamar who says, who is Lenin? He's your mama. Lenin is your mama. And Nelson says, Musk is a trillionaire, and they're talking about Lupita Nyong'o in the Odyssey. It's over. They're beyond saving. They're peon for the elite. Oh, my God, man. Oh, my God. My guy Nelson always got the jokes, man. Dog, that's true. Right-wingers are more upset that Elon Musk became a billionaire off of our fucking money shooting rockets in the fucking sky, and half of them broke down. But because this motherfucker, you know what I'm saying, loves racist white men, and they're allowed, they would gladly let Elon pee in their mouth and give their wife gonorrhea and eat the cum dumped into their wife's crotch after Elon busted in it. They would gladly eat that up. Right-wingers would gladly do that if it just meant that black people would be hurt and poor people would be hurt. They would let Elon get filthy fucking rich. God, Nelson is absolutely right, man. They're over here complaining about, Helen of Troy wasn't a black woman. Helen of Troy probably didn't even fucking exist. Who gives a fuck? But meanwhile, Elon Musk is literally pissing in their mouth. And they're just, oh my God. Yeah, they're done. Nelson came through with the truth once again. Anyway, shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. There will be a part 2 of the vertical live stream. Same live stream horizontally will run. Not going to cut it off. Y'all be easy out there. All power to the people. See you pretty soon. Peace. What's up, everybody? Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, and we are back. We are back for part 2 of episode 25 of Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. I had to step away for a minute to do an English class. As you know, YouTube does not pay the bills. I do this for the love of the game, for the sport of it all. So we are back to complete chapter 24. It's a long chapter. There's still a few more pages left. I think about 7 or 8 or so. So we're just going to knock it out real quick. I'll give some commentary. Shout out to everybody who came in for the previous live stream. That was very big. Hopefully you stick around to see the rest of the chapter and the rest of the commentary and to engage in the conversation. So without further ado, let's get into it. When the streets had been cleansed of the masses, the young government of the revolution stretched out its gouty limbs. Workers' representatives were arrested. Weapons were seized. One district of the town was cut off from another. At about 6 o'clock in the morning, an automobile stopped in front of the editorial office of Pravda. It was loaded with junkers and soldiers with a machine gun, which was immediately set up at the window. After the departure of these uninvited guests, the office was a picture of destruction. Desk drawers smashed open, the floor heaped with torn-up manuscripts, the telephones ripped loose. The sentries and employees of the office had been beaten up and arrested. A still more violent attack was made on the printing plant, for whose purchase the workers had been collecting money during the last 3 months. The rotary presses were destroyed, monotypes ruined, linotype machines smashed to pieces. The Bolsheviks were wrong, it seems, when they accused the Kerensky government of lacking energy. Generally speaking, the streets had now become normal, writes Sukhanov. There were almost no crowds of street meetings. Almost all of the stores were open. In the morning, the summons of the Bolsheviks to stop the demonstration, the last product of the destroyed printing plant, was distributed. Cossacks and junkers were arresting sailors, soldiers, and workers on the streets and sending them to jail or to the guardhouses. In the stores and on the sidewalks, the talk was of German money. They arrested everybody who made a peep in defense of the Bolsheviks. It was no longer possible to declare Lenin an honest man. They would take you to the police station. Sukhanov, as always, appears as an attentive observer of what is happening on the streets of the bourgeoisie, the intelligentsia, the burghers. But things look different in the workers' districts. The factories and shops were still closed. The mood was vigilant. Rumors went round that troops had arrived from the front. The streets of the Viborg section were filled with groups discussing what to do in case of attack. The Red Guards and the factory youth in general, says Metalev, were getting ready to penetrate the Peter and Paul fortress and support the detachment besieged there, concealing hand grenades in their pockets, in their shoes, under their coats. They crossed the river in rowboats and partly by the bridges. The typesetter Smirnov from the Komolensky district remembers, I saw a tugboat with naval cadets coming down the Neva from Dudenhof and Oranienbaum. Toward 2 o'clock, the situation cleared up in the bad sense. I saw how the sailors, one by one, were returning to Kronstadt along the back streets. The story was being spread that all Bolsheviks were German spies. A vile hue and cry was raised. The historian Milikov sums it all up with satisfaction. The mood and personnel of the public on the streets had completely changed. By evening, Petrograd was entirely tranquil. So, as we're seeing here, the Bolsheviks were a part of the workers' movement to finally seize power, to bring power to the Soviets, which is what the workers were continually demanding in Russia. And now we're seeing the beginning of the full force of the counter-revolution. Before this moment here, the Provisional Government, the Executive Committee, the bourgeois leaders, they had all essentially said, you know, we're going to be a part of this revolution. Yeah, we're going to transform Russia. We're just not going to do this and this and this and this that the workers are demanding, etc. And so the workers are continuing to put pressure on them to eventually give up power. That's why the people are marching through the streets saying all power to the Soviets. But what happens instead? The government is now starting to clamp down for real, bringing that iron fist, shooting at people, killing people, arresting people, etc., etc. Okay? All right, continuing here. So long as the troops from the front had not arrived, Petrograd headquarters, with the political cooperation of the compromisers, continued to disguise its intentions. In the afternoon, some members of the executive committee, with Lieber at their head, came to the palace of Kishenskaya. I don't know why I can't pronounce that. I've said it before. They came to the palace of Kishenskaya for a conference with the Bolshevik leaders. That visit alone testified to a very peaceable feeling. According to the agreement then arrived at, the Bolsheviks were to induce the sailors to return to Kronstadt, to withdraw the machine gun company from the Peter and Paul fortress, and to remove the patrols and armored cars from their positions. The government, on its part, promised not to permit any pogroms or repressions against the Bolsheviks, and to liberate all arrested persons except those who had engaged in criminal activities. But the agreement did not last long. As the rumors spread about German money and the approach of troops from the front, more and more detachments and small groups were discovered in the garrison, mindful of their loyalty to the government and to Kerensky. They sent delegates to the Tauride Palace or to the district staff. Finally, echelons from the front actually began to arrive. The mood in compromised spheres grew fiercer and fiercer from hour to hour. The troops from the front had arrived all ready to snatch the capital with bloody hands from the agents of the Kaiser. Now that it was clear the troops were not needed, it became necessary to justify sending for them. To avoid falling under suspicion themselves, the compromisers tried with all their might to show the commanders that the Mensheviks and social revolutionaries belonged to the same camp with them, and that Bolsheviks were a common enemy. When Kamenev tried to remind the members of the Presidium of the Executive Committee about the agreement arrived at a few hours before, Lieber answered in the tone of an iron-hearted statesman. The correlation of forces has now changed. Lieber had learned from the popular speeches of Lassalle that canon is an important part of a constitution. A delegation of Kronstadters, headed by Raskolnikov, was several times summoned before the military commission of the executive committee, where the demands, increasing from hour to hour, at last resolved themselves into an ultimatum from Lieber that they should agree at once to the disarming of the Kronstadt men. Departing from the session of the military commission, relates Raskolnikov, we renewed our conference with Trotsky and Kamenev. Liev Davidovich Trotsky, advised us immediately and secretly to send the Kronstadters home. A decision was adopted to send comrades around the barracks to warn the Kronstadters that they were going to be forcibly disarmed. A majority of the Kronstadters got away in time. Only a few detachments remained in the house of Kishenskaya and the Peter and Paul fortress. So, once again, Trotsky is talking about how avoiding violence is necessary sometimes. I do believe maybe Trotsky read Sun Tzu's Art of War, and one of the strategies in the Art of War, if you've ever read this book, is that retreat is sometimes the most astute thing to do. As I quoted Sun Tzu before in a previous live stream, the best battle is the one you don't even have to fight. The best battle, the best victory is the one you don't even have to fight for. And so, yeah, that's what I think Trotsky's strategy was for actually retreating. Shout out to AAA up in the live stream, AAA1361. He says hi from Poland. I have a question for my Polish viewer, pardon. Have you ever heard of Lotzi Gang? Have you ever heard of Lotzi Gang? How popular is he? What is he popular for in Poland? Okay. And my second question for my Polish viewer who is tuning in, my question is, why did Poland ban all communist parties? I understand that they're going to say that, we went through brutal communism, Stalin was so bad to us, etc., the communists invaded us, etc. But, Poland sort of prides itself on being a liberal democracy in the vein of like America, the UK, etc., like Western democracies. And by and large, Western democracies have not reached that point where they're banning communist parties. Sure, communists are banned on certain ballots in America, like in Texas, you cannot run as an open communist, for example. I don't know if the same applies to my home state of Louisiana, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I would like to know the rationale behind why the Polish banned their communist parties. And also, have you heard of Lotzi Gang? So that's to my Polish viewer. Hopefully he's still in there. All right. So I'm going to send some people out of here. Shout out to Just Raven up in the live stream saying hi. Hi. I think I remember Just Raven. That name sounds familiar. But yeah, let's continue here. Let's continue here up in the live stream as well. Okay. And yeah, continuing here. With the knowledge and consent of the Minister Socialist, Prince Lvov had already on July 4th given General Polovtsev a written order to arrest the Bolsheviks occupying the house of Kishenskaya, clear out the house, and occupy it with troops. At this time, after the destruction of the editorial office and printing plant, the question of the fate of the central headquarters of the Bolsheviks became a very vital one. It was necessary to put the residents in a state of defense. The military organization appointed Raskolnikov commander of the building. He took his duties in a broad way, in a Kronstadt way, sent requisitions for cannon, and even ordered a small warship to enter the mouth of the Neva. Raskolnikov subsequently explained this step in the following manner. These military preparations were, of course, made on my part, not merely with a view to self-defense, since there was a smell in the air not only of powder, but of pogroms. I also thought, and not, I believe, without foundation, that one good warship in the mouth of the Neva would be enough to considerably shake the resolution of the Provisional Government. All this is rather indefinite and none too serious. We may rather assume that at 5 o'clock in the afternoon of July 5th, the leaders of the military organization, including Raskolnikov, had not yet estimated the extent of the changes in the situation, and hence at that moment when the armed demonstration was compelled to beat a hasty retreat in order not to turn into an armed insurrection imposed by the enemy, some of the military leaders made certain accidental and not well thought out steps forward. The young Kronstadt leaders did in this first action overreach themselves. But can you make a revolution without the help of people who overreach themselves? Indeed, does not a certain percentage of light-mindedness enter as a constituent part into all great human deeds? This time it came to nothing more than instructions, and these, moreover, were soon annulled by Raskolnikov himself. During this time, more and more alarming news was pouring into the place. One man had seen in the windows of a house on the opposite shore of the Neva machine guns aimed at the palace of Kishenskaya. Another had observed a column of armored automobiles traveling in the same direction. A third brought news of the approach of a detachment of Cossacks. 2 members of the military organization were sent to the commander of the district to negotiate. Polovtsev assured the emissaries that the raid on Pravda had been made without his knowledge and that no repressions were in preparation against the military organization. In reality, he was only awaiting sufficient reinforcements from the front. So, Trotsky brings up an interesting point right here. A revolution, of course, is the mass movement of people to make some change in their society, and what we want is the change in society where the workers are in control, not liberal elites, etc. So he says that some type of people with light-headedness, light-mindedness, people who overreach are important for a revolution. So I asked this question to the audience because we seem to have a very engaged audience. A lot of people are here talking in the comments. So my question for people in the audience is this: should we involve anarchists as a part of our movement? Because the anarchists have been some of the most bout it. If there's anybody who's willing to, face tear gas, face rubber bullets, blow up military installations, you know what I'm saying? All that sort of stuff. The anarchists are about that action. They about that life, to say the least. The anarchists are the most about it. I would say more than us MLs. So should we involve anarchists in our movement? Because they're going to be the ones who are going to be, tossing a few Molotovs here and there. All right, go into the comment section. Okay. So smiling is free said, can I get a big smile? This is me smiling. Smiling is free. This is me smiling. Hopefully that didn't cut off. Hopefully the live stream is still going. Okay. Let's make sure. Let's make sure all these, all right, white supremacists are kicked out of here. All right. And going now to our Polish friend. He says, 1361 says, Poland banned communism in its historical realized form as a violent, oppressive, and undemocratic totalitarian system. The intention was to firmly cut ties with the painful past and protect modern civic freedoms from a repeat of history. Before most of us regular people in Poland, communism let live more their lives. Okay, interesting. So, yeah, I guess the Polish government is made up of the bourgeoisie, of course, right? Poland is a liberal, Western, bourgeois government. And of course, now that they're in power, they're going to do whatever they can to fight any sort of economic changes against their liberal economic policy. So austerity, starving out the people, making people fight and scramble for every single crumb as they try to make a life for themselves with the working conditions in their country. They're going to do whatever they can to fight against any sort of revolutionary potential. So it's fertile ground in Poland, from what you're saying, 1361, for the bourgeois in Poland to essentially say, hey, remember in the past when all you people had this and that sort of, social rights, economic rights, and that sort of stuff? But don't you remember that bad guy Stalin and all that shit he did to us? Don't you remember the brutal wars that were fought between the Nazis and the communists? And then the communists eventually got rid of the Nazis. But let's try to equate Nazism and communism too. That was bad, right? So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. From what you're saying, 1361, essentially, the bourgeois have just painted, all communism as bad in the official documents. But what you're saying is that most regular Polish people who were around during that time do remember when they had, guaranteed jobs, guaranteed housing, guaranteed a certain standard of living, etc., etc. Okay? So, all right, we're going to put use liberty in timeout. We're putting him in timeout because he is not talking about the text. I should pin this comment. I'm going to do this in my live streams moving forward. I will pin a comment so everybody knows the rules coming in here. If you're not talking about the text, if you're not talking about the topic, one of the questions that I ask to the audience, you will instantly go to the re-education camp for 10 minutes as a warning. Second warning, instantly to the gulag, never to be seen again. Never to be seen again. I should pin that. But anybody listening now should know. In fact, I have time. Let's just take that brief time right now to pin this comment. I want this comment to be pinned so that everybody knows they have full warning whenever they join the live stream. It's a tactic of some people to try to purposely disrupt people who are trying to do their work. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I think a lot of y'all are doing. Let me just briefly write this in here. All right. Anyone not commenting on the book, the topic, or a question I pose to the audience will get 10 minutes in timeout, followed by an instant ban on second warning. Okay, boom. All right, and that's going to be pinned, and this is now new practice. New practice. Absolutely, that's good. So shout out to Pablo up in the live stream saying hello to you. You see the rules? Keep that in mind. Let's go here. Continuing, Trotsky says, during this time, when Kronstadt was retreating, the Baltic fleet as a whole was still only getting ready to advance. The principal part of the fleet was in the Finland waters with a total of about 70,000 sailors. An army corps was also located in Finland, and 10,000 Russian workers were in the port factories of Helsingfors. That was a good-sized fist of the revolution. The pressure of the sailors and soldiers was so irresistible that even the Helsingfors Committee of the Social Revolutionaries had come out against the coalition, and in consequence, all the Soviet bodies of the fleet and army in Finland had unanimously demanded that the Executive Committee take the power. In support of their demand, the Baltic men were ready at any moment to move into the mouth of the Neva. They were restrained, however, by the fear of weakening the naval line of defense and making it easy for the German fleet to attack Kronstadt and Petrograd. But here, something completely unexpected occurred. The Central Committee of the Baltic Fleet, the so-called Centrobalt, called on the 4th of July an extraordinary session of the ship committees at which the president, Dybenko, read 2 secret orders just received by the fleet commander and signed by the assistant minister of the Navy, Dudarev. The first obliged The first obliged the Admiral Verodevsky to send 4 destroyers to Petrograd to prevent by force the landing of sailors from the side of Kronstadt. The second demanded of the commander of the fleet that he should not, on any pretext, permit the departure of ships from Helsingfors to Kronstadt, not hesitating to sink disobedient ships with submarines. Finding himself between 2 fires and worried most of all about his own head, the admiral anticipated events by turning over the telegram to the Central Balt, with the announcement that he would not carry out the orders even if countersigned by the Central Blatt. The reading of the telegram startled the sailors. To be sure, they had been ready on any pretext to abuse Kerensky and the compromisers in no kind-hearted terms, but up to now this had been, in their eyes, an intra-Soviet struggle. A majority of the executive committee belonged to the same parties as the majority in the regional committee of Finland that had just come out for a Soviet government. It seemed clear enough that neither Mensheviks nor social revolutionaries could possibly approve the sinking of ships which had come out for the power of the executive committee. How could an old naval officer like Dudarev get mixed up in a family quarrel of the Soviets, turning it into a naval battle? Only yesterday, the big battleships have been officially regarded as the bulwark of the revolution, and this in contrast to the backward destroyers and submarines, which had hardly been touched by revolutionary propaganda. Could it be that the government now seriously intended to sink the battleships with the help of the submarines? Very interesting. So once again, the government, in trying to maintain control and order and stop the Soviets from taking power, is willing to destroy their own boats, willing to sink their own sailors, kill their own men to make sure the bourgeois stay in power. Now, are these the people that are supposed to lead us? Is bourgeois liberal democracy really the way of enlightenment? Would enlightened liberals do this? Would they do this? Would they do this? I don't know. Okay? All right. So let's go here. All right, let's send, what's his name? Yeah, he's got to go to the gulag. By the way, getting sent to the gulag, getting banned permanently is still up to my own discretion, and that's what shall happen. Okay? All right. Reason is true. Okay. Pablo, once again, I don't know if you speak English. This is for English speakers primarily. If you're not going to engage with the text, you will get put in timeout. Okay, going to 1361, the experience of totalitarianism. Following, okay, this is just Chat GPT. Okay, this guy is just putting in Chat GPT stuff. Okay, yeah, we're going to send some people here to the gulag instantly. That's pretty easy. Okay, all right, so yeah, all right. Let's send more people here out to the gulag. Easy. This is easy. If you want to get banned, just say hi. Look at the text. You know what to do. If you want to get banned, I love banning y'all. I love it. It's the best part. Because this makes the chat better for people that are coming here to engage. Okay? Continuing here. These facts simply could not find their way into the stubborn skulls of the sailors. That orders that justifiably seemed to them to belong to the realm of nightmare was nevertheless a legitimate July harvest of the March sowing. Already in April, the Mensheviks and social revolutionaries had begun to appeal to the provinces against Petrograd, to the soldiers against the workers, to the cavalry against the machine gunners. They had given the troops representative privileges in the Soviets about the factories. They had favored the small and scattered enterprises as against the giants of the metal industry. Themselves representing the past, they had sought support in backwardness of all kinds. With the ground slipping under their feet, they were now inciting the rear guard against the advance guard. Politics has its own logic, especially in times of revolution. Pressed from all sides, the compromisers had found themselves obliged to direct Admiral Verodevsky to sink the more advanced battleships. Unfortunately for the compromisers, the backward ones upon whom they were relying were more and more striving to catch up to those in advance. The submarine command was no less indignant at Dudarev's orders than the commanders of the battleships. Okay? So, all right. Shout out to 1361. He says, it's not Chat GPT. It's a Polish article. Okay, very interesting, but I'm not interested in what the article says now because I already got it from the first thing you said. I want to know what you think about it. Do you think it's democratic or right for you to ban people or ban parties of a certain ideology? I know I might be hypocritical because I would like to see all fascistic parties in America banned, like we do have an actual Nazi party in America and other various right-wing parties. I would like to see the KKK banned. But can you really ban an idea? Can you really ban an idea? And if a government claims to be democratic, to claim to represent the people, and that people have the freedom of speech and the freedom of association, is it democratic to ban people from associating with communists? If you find them so nefarious, so repulsive, why not just let those people do it? I don't claim to be a liberal, and I don't claim to uphold liberal democratic norms. So I could easily say, in my ideal world, yes, there would be certain parties banned. But in liberal democracy, the idea is that everybody has a voice, freedom of speech should be allowed, and freedom of association should be okay. Though I argue that that is not right. That is not right, in my opinion. But 1361, I imagine that you are probably, a liberal. You know what I mean? I imagine that you are a liberal. Okay? I imagine you're a liberal, so answer me that. Answer me that, okay? But let's continue here. The men at the Central Blatt were not at all of the Hamlet type. They lost no time in passing a resolution, together with the members of the ship committees, to send immediately to Petrograd the squadron destroyer Orpheus, designated for the sinking of the Kronstadters, in the first place to get information as to what was happening there, and in the second to arrest the assistant minister of the Navy Dudarev. However unexpected this decision may seem, it nevertheless clearly reveals to what an extent the Baltic sailors were still inclined to regard the compromisers as a private opponent in contrast to any old Dudarev whom they considered a public enemy. The Orpheus entered the mouth of the Neva 24 hours after the 10,000 armed Kronstadters had moored their vessels there. But the correlation of forces had changed. For a whole day the crew was not permitted to disembark. Only in the evening, a delegation consisting of 67 sailors from the Central Blatt and the ship's crews was admitted to the joint session of the Executive Committee, then engaged in casting up the first balance of the July days. The victors were luxuriating in their new victory. The spokesman, Wojtyński, was complacently describing the hours of weakness and humiliation, in order the more sharply to depict the triumph which followed. The first unit which came to our help, he said, was the armored cars. We firmly intended, in case of violence from the side of the armed gang, to open fire. Seeing the extent of the danger threatening the revolution, we issued an order to certain units on the front to entrain and come to the capital. A majority of that high assembly were breathing out hatred for the Bolsheviks, and especially for the sailors. It was in this atmosphere that the Baltic delegates arrived armed with an order for the arrest of Dudarev. With a wild yelp, a pounding of fists on tables, and a stamping of feet, the victors greeted the reading of the resolution of the Baltic fleet. Arrest Dudarev? Why, this gallant captain of the first rank was only fulfilling his sacred duty to the revolution, which they, the sailors, the rebels, the counter-revolutionists, were stabbing in the back. In a special resolution, the joint session solemnly declared its solidarity with Dudarev. The sailors looked at the orators and at each other with startled eyes. Only at this moment did they begin to understand what had been taking place before their eyes. The next day, the whole delegation was arrested and completed its political education in jail. Immediately after that, the president of the Central Blatt, the non-commissioned naval officer Dybenko, who had followed them up, was arrested, and after him also Admiral Verderevsky, who had been summoned to the capital to explain matters. So, once again, the people and the leaders at this time in Russia are totally unaligned. Of course, the people now who are leading the country in the executive committee, the bourgeois government that is claiming to have power over Russia, is using the words of the revolution. They're saying, we're here to defend the revolution. The Russian people have spoken, and us bourgeois people, us rich people, the former landowners and all of us, friends of the former czar, we are now in control, and trust us, we are here to defend the revolution. And defending the revolution means killing your fellow sailors who have been a part of the Soviet and want to support the Soviet. which is the Council of Workers administering a government in Petrograd and other parts of the country. And the sailors are like, what? That's not what we are fighting for. That is not the revolution I heard about. But yet and still, the bourgeois government is using these terms created by the revolutionaries to now call those sailors counter-revolutionists. Okay? So, yeah, let's put some more people here. All right, who else? Okay, let's put some more people here. All right, Gulag for M.H. Bach. Yeah, he's got to go. Okay, we got to put NBR Love in the Gulag too. Okay, and okay. Now let's go to the comment from A1361. Communism Poland was still under ZSRR command. Theoretically free for people, but not for any own system. Okay, your English is absolutely horrible, 1361. Horrible, horrible English. All right, that's why it's so controversial, because a regular guy says communism was a golden age, but independence as a country equals zero. Okay, and then 1361 says Poland did not ban communist parties simply for being communist, but rather banned any parties and organization that appealed to the totalitarian methods and practices of communism. Well, first and foremost, communism is not inherently totalitarian or, I would argue, dictatorial. It's no more dictatorial than what we live under right now. I want to ask 1361, do rich people in Poland pretty much control society? Do rich people in Poland pretty much have their way? Are they able to, influence politicians, make sure that they get the best tax breaks? Are they able to make sure that their companies pay less and less to the state to help fund schools, roads, and bridges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Of course, it's Europe, so of course they're going to have a certain social safety net that we are not accustomed to in America. And possibly the tax rate is probably much higher in Poland than it is in the U.S. I'm just guessing, though I could be wrong. But I'll just ask. In Poland, do rich people have an exorbitant amount of power, more than the average mass of people who just work 9 to 5 every single day? If that is the case, and I would argue it probably is the case in Poland, like it is in most places in the world, we are still living under a dictatorship. So if you're going to say, communism is inherently totalitarian, authoritarian, number one, all systems have to be to some degree authoritarian. Authority has to be dictated by somebody, okay? Us communists, us Marxist-Leninists are not, anarchists in the sense that we believe actual authority is somehow a negative thing. It can be negative. There can be negative totalitarianism. There can be negative authoritarianism. But would you say living in your parents' house where your parents tell you what to do, is that a type of totalitarianism? Yeah. Is it mostly positive if your parents are loving you and they just want to protect you? Yeah. Same thing. You know what I mean? These are the same sort of arguments that right-wingers make as to why they need a strong executive, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I just want to ask you that, okay? But it sounds like anybody under this law that they have in Poland would be labeled a, totalitarian, authoritarian, extremist. And therefore, by extension, they would be banned from political office or their party would be banned, right? Because let's just say, hypothetically, I started a Trotskyist party. Trotskyism is often associated with the anti-authoritarian trend within Marxism. Trotsky never gained power in the Soviet Union, so he becomes the big hypothetical what if? What if the Soviet Union did not become this hellhole under Stalin, as some people claim? What if I started a Trotskyist party? I'm pretty sure my Trotskyist party would be banned in Poland if it was explicitly Marxist, communist, because it sounds like from what you have described of this law in Poland, it would be considered extremist by that definition. You know what I'm saying? So once again, I'd like to ask you, 1361, to clarify your position and engage in the conversation because I find that very interesting. So continuing here, Trotsky says, on the morning of the 6th, the workers went back to work. Only the troops summoned from the front were now demonstrating in the streets. Agents of the intelligence service were examining passports and making arrests right and left. A young worker, Voinov, who was distributing the Pravda leaflet, published in place of the destroyed Bolshevik paper, was killed in the streets by a gang, perhaps composed of these same intelligence men. The Black Hundred elements were acquiring a taste for the putting down of revolts. Nasty, nasty work. Plundering, violence, and in some places, shooting continued in different parts of the city. In the course of the day, echelon after echelon arrived from the front. The Cavalier Division, the Don Cossack Regiment, the Uhlan Division, the Izborski and Malorosisky, the Dragon Regiment, and others. The Cossack divisions, arriving in great numbers, writes Gorky's paper, were in a very aggressive mood. Machine gun fire was opened on the newly arrived Izborski Regiment in two parts of the city. In both cases, the machine guns were found in an attic. Those guilty were not discovered. In other places, too, the arriving troops were shot at. The deliberate madness of the shooting deeply disturbed the workers. It was clear that experienced provocateurs were greeting the soldiers with lead. We're greeting the soldiers with lead. God, I hate that English word. God, I hate that English word. Okay? So the deliberate madness, the deliberate madness of the shooting deeply disturbed the workers. It was clear that experienced provocateurs were greeting the soldiers with lead with a view to anti-Bolshevik inoculation. The workers were eager to explain this to the arriving soldiers, but they were denied access to them. For the first time since the February days, the junker or the officer stood between the worker and the soldier. So, I know y'all are tired of me saying this, but what Trotsky is saying here is that essentially the right wing is trying to take back power in the heart of the revolution. In February, the workers, the soldiers, the peasants took over Petrograd. They had this city, and they've had this city under their control ever since then. And since then, other Soviets have popped up around the country, and Soviet is just another word for Workers' Council. They created these Soviets in Petrograd. People are voting and deciding on what the new society should be like, how we're going to distribute the wealth of this nation that they generated. And now the government is clamping down hard. They're sending in soldiers. They're sending in Cossacks. They're creating paramilitary right-wing gangs that are just killing, leftists who are passing out leaflets and stuff like that. And it's very, very disheartening. And what Trotsky is saying here is that the soldiers who are being brought in are being deluded into thinking that they're helping the revolution by bringing order to this anarchic city of Petrograd, where the Soviet base is, the strongest Soviet is. And the only people stopping these soldiers from learning the truth of what they're doing are the officers. And before them, the workers and the soldiers have been like this. The workers and the soldiers have been like this because they both have been experiencing exploitation from the ruling class. As we saw, the workers have been sent to the front lines in World War I, shot at with no shoes and no guns and getting abused and stuff like that for a losing war where only profits were gained by the billionaires. And the workers and the soldiers were once again in line. And now, finally, we are seeing something very similar to what exists in America right now. Many of the people who are in the military in the United States, the Marines, Navy, Air Force, the regular Army, Coast Guard, National Reserve, whatever it's called, right? Shit, I forgot that name. All of them, most of them come from the working class. They come from the poor. They come from marginalized groups because America is predatory on those people. They depend on poor working men to be the bedrock of our militaristic empire. And what has stopped them from being radicalized is, first and foremost, leftists calling most soldiers baby killers and all cops bastards and stuff like that, which is a wrong part of our strategy. But secondly, the indoctrination of the officers, not only of the society, but top down. In the military ranks, there's a lot of reactionaryism that's stewed and encouraged coming from the top down. You get what I'm saying? I believe in the 1940s or 50s, I read something like this, that most of the members of the U.S. military were trained or indoctrinated in strong anti-communism. They would explain communism to them and explain why it's so bad and stuff like that. That's one thing that I've heard. I need to verify that. But once again, I think this is what Trotsky is getting at. He's speaking to us from the grave and giving us insight into how we can deal with our situation right now. Sorry for that long rant and tirade, but it feels so good It feels so good to actually talk about the fucking book. Okay? Shout out to Anon Watcher. Okay, thank you for complimenting the outfit. What do you think about Trotsky? What do you think about the text? What do you think about the book? We are here to talk about the text, not how sexy and melanin I am. Okay, I know that. What I'm here to talk about is Trotsky. We're here to talk about Trotsky. All right. The compromisers joyfully welcomed the arriving regiments at a meeting of representatives of the troops in the presence of a great number of officers and junkers. Our friend Voitinsky unctuously explained. Now, along Million Street, troops in armored cars are traveling toward Palace Square to place themselves at the disposal of General Polovtsev, and this is our real strength upon which we rely. To act as a political covering, 4 socialist assistants were appointed to the commander of the district, Avkenstiev and Gotz from the executive committee, Skobelev and Chernov from the Provisional Government. But that did not save the commander. Kerensky subsequently boasted to the White Guards that on returning from the front in the July days, he had discharged General Polovtsev for irresolution. Going to the comments. All right. Yeah. Anon Watcher says, okay, I asked you about Trotsky. He said, works on paper, but not in real life because greed, my fly bow. Okay. All right. This guy, he thinks in bourgeois thinking. Anon Watcher probably would suck the dick of a billionaire for $1 million. That's bourgeois thinking here. Bourgeois thinking. And it's so sad to think that that's actually how most Americans think. Most people in the Western developed world think that if I suck the dick of a billionaire, my life will get better. Rather than the idea that we deserve the wealth that we generate in our society. Absolutely sad. Absolutely sad. Anon Watcher is a cocksucker for billionaires. Because if you defend capitalism, that's the only thing I can say about you. You're a cocksucker for billionaires. You want to suck big millionaire cock. That's all you want to do. Okay? Yes, you do. Because if you can't see that socialism is our only way out of barbarism, out of hell, out of seeing our planet be destroyed, out of seeing children getting bombed in Iran, out of seeing our living conditions depress and continue to regress in the West, then you are a cocksucker for billionaires. If you can't see that socialism is our only way out of barbarism, you are a hoe. You are a whole hoe. If you are a capitalist pig, you are a hoe. You are a whole hoe. Ho. All right? I'm going to continue here. Trotsky says, now at last it was possible to solve the so long postponed problem, to clean up that wasp's nest of Bolsheviks in the house of Kishenskaya, in social life in general, and particularly in a time of revolution. Secondary facts which act upon the imagination sometimes acquire, through their symbolic meaning, an enormous significance. Thus, a disproportionately large place in the struggle against the Bolsheviks was occupied by the question of the seizure by Lenin of the palace of Kishenskaya, a court ballerina famous not so much for her art as for her relations with the male representatives of the Romanov dynasty. Her private palace was the fruit of these relations, the foundation of which was laid down, it seems, by Nicholas II when still heir to the throne. Before the war, people gossiped with a tingle of envious respectfulness about this den of luxury, spurs, and diamonds located opposite the Winter Palace. But in wartime, they more frequently remarked stolen goods. The soldiers expressed themselves even more accurately. Arriving at a critical age, the ballerina took up a career in patriotism. The outspoken Rodzianko has this to say on that subject. The High Commander-in-Chief, the Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, remarked that he was aware of the participation and influence in artillery matters of the ballerina, Kishenskaya, through whom various firms had received orders. It is no wonder if, after the revolution, the abandoned palace of Kishenskaya failed to awaken benevolent feelings among the people. In those times when the revolution was making an insatiable demand for quarters, the government never dared lay its hands on a single private residence. To requisition the peasants' horses for the war, that is one thing. To requisition vacant palaces for the revolution, that is quite another. But the masses of the people saw it otherwise. Very interesting. I didn't know the Bolsheviks were laid up in the house of a ballerina whore. That's where they were. The Palace Kishenskaya was basically a whore's retreat. I didn't know that. Didn't know that. All right. Shout out to Rai Brown up in the live stream and everybody else joining as well. Hopefully you find this engaging. Hopefully you're learning something as well as we continue to talk about revolution in Russia and how we can have revolution in America. Let's continue here. On a search for suitable quarters, a reserve armored car division had run into the residence of Kishenskaya in the first days of March and occupied it. The ballerina had an excellent garage. The division gladly turned over the upper story of the building to the Petrograd Committee of the Bolsheviks. The friendship of the Bolsheviks with this armored car division supplemented their friendship with the machine gunners. The occupation of the palace, which occurred a few weeks before the arrival of Lenin, passed almost unnoticed at first. The indignation against the usurpers grew with the growth of the influence of the Bolsheviks. The wild stories in the newspapers about how Lenin was occupying the boudoir of the ballerina and how all the decorations of the palace had been shattered to pieces and torn up were mere lies. Lenin lived in the modest apartment of his sister. The ballerina's furnishings were put away by the commandant of the building and kept under seal. Sukhanov, who visited the palace at the time of Lenin's arrival, has left an interesting description of the quarters. The chambers of the famous ballerina had a rather strange and inappropriate look. The exquisite ceilings and walls did not harmonize at all with the unpretentious furnishings. The primitive tables, chairs, and benches set casually about according to the demands of business. In general, there was very little furniture. Kishenskaya's movable property had been put away somewhere. Discreetly avoiding the question of the armored car division, the press represented Lenin as guilty of an armed seizure of the house from the hands of a defenseless devotee of art. This theme was developed in leading editorials and feuilletons. Tattered workers and soldiers among those velvet and silks and beautiful rugs. All the drawing rooms of the capital shuddered with moral indignation. As once the Girondists held the Jacobins responsible for the September murders, the disappearance of mattresses in the barracks, and the campaign for an agrarian law, so now the cadets and Democrats accuse the Bolsheviks of undermining the pillars of human morality and hawking and spitting on the polished floors of the palace of Kishenskaya. I'm sorry. The dynastic ballerina became a symbol of culture, trampled under the hoofs of barbarism. This is like saying... Trotsky is funny, man, because he's saying, like, the bourgeoisie are mad at the Bolsheviks for running in this palace, Kishenskaya, when it's like running up in an OnlyFans content house. If we ran up in the OnlyFans content house of, what, Sophie Rain? I don't know. Who's the biggest OnlyFans girl? Who's also MAGA aligned, which I'm sure most of them are. Oh, shit. It's like if we raided Epstein Island and then the bourgeoisie say, how dare you? How dare you? Trotsky's a funny dude, man. He's a funny dude, man. Funny dude. All right, continuing here. The dynastic ballerina became a symbol of culture trampled under the hoofs of barbarism. This apotheosis gave wings to the lady herself, and she complained to the court, oh, she's still alive. That little slut is still alive, okay? But this was not quite so easy to do. The armored cars on duty in the courtyard looked sufficiently imposing, remembers Zaleski, then a member of the Petrograd Committee. Moreover, the Machine-Gun Regiment and the other units, too, were ready in case of need to back up the armored cars. On May 25th, the Bureau of the Executive Committee, upon a complaint from the ballerina's lawyer, recognized that the interest of the revolution demands submission to the decisions of the court. Beyond this Platonic aphorism, however, the compromisers did not venture, to the extreme distress of the ballerina, who was not by nature inclined to Platonism. Ha 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 ha. Go into the comments here. All right, let's see if there are any new comments. Okay. All right, once again, y'all see the pinned comment here. All right, you're going on timeout. And once again, this is up to my discretion. All right. Dialogue says, what's up with the red bandana? I'm a red. I am a red. Okay. So that's why. And you go on timeout for 10 minutes. Think about that. All right. Shout out to Onyx. He says, hello from France. We can talk. We can talk about the book. We can talk about Trotsky. What do you think about Trotsky? What do you think about his assessment of the Russian Revolution? What do you think about the counter-revolution waged by the bourgeoisie against the people? Tell me what you think about that. If you don't have any thoughts about that, get on somewhere, as my granny would say. Continuing here. The Central Committee, the Petrograd Committee, and the military organization continued to work in the palace side by side. A continuous mass of people crowded into the houses of Kasheniskaya, says Raskolnikov. Some would come on business to this or that secretariat, others to the literature department, others to the editorial offices of the Soldiers' Pravda, others to some meeting or other. Meetings took place very often, sometimes continually, either in the spacious wide hall below or in the room upstairs with a long table which had evidently been the dining room of the ballerina. From the palace balcony, above which waved the impressive banner of the Central Committee, orators carried on a continuous mass meeting, not only by day but by night. Often, out of the darkness, some military detachment would approach the building or some crowd of workers with a demand for an orator. Accidental groups of citizens would also stop before the balcony, their curiosity aroused by some uproar in the newspapers. During the critical days, hostile manifestations would draw near to the building, for a time, demanding the arrest of Lenin and the driving out of the Bolsheviks. Under the streams of people flowing past the palace, one felt the seething depths of the revolution. The house of Kasheniskaya reached its apogee in the July days. The chief headquarters of the movement, says Milikov, was not the Tauride Palace, but Lenin's citadel, the house of Kasheniskaya with its classic balcony. The putting down of the demonstration led fatally to the breakup of this staff headquarters of the Bolsheviks. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they advanced against the house of Kasheniskaya and the Peter and Paul fortress, separated from each other by a strip of water, the reserve battalion of the Petrograd Regiment, a machine-gun detachment, a company of Semenovsky, a company of Preobrazhensky, the training squad of the Volinsky Regiment, 2 cannon and a detachment of 8 armored cars. At 7 o'clock in the morning, an assistant of the commander of the district, the Social Revolutionary Kuzmin, demanded that the house be vacated. Not wishing to surrender their weapons, the Kronstadters, of whom there remained only 120 in the palace, dashed across to the Peter and Paul fortress. All right, we have our last paragraph coming up. Last paragraph. If you have any comments or questions for me, put it in the chat, and I will try to get to it after we finish our last paragraph today. All right? So anything you want to say? This is open discussion time. It doesn't have to be related to the book at this point. So yeah, we'll try to get to that. Shout out to everybody who's been joining the live stream and everybody who has been engaged in what we are talking about. Okay? Last paragraph right here. Hold on one second. Just checking the horizontal stream, see if anybody's out there. All right, let's go here. When the government troops occupied the house, they found nobody there but a few employees. There then remained the problem of the Peter and Paul fortress. Young Red Guards, as we remember, had gone over from the Viborg district in order, in case of need, to help the sailors. On the fortress walls, one of them relates, stood a number of cannon, evidently set up by the sailors in case anything should happen. It began to look like bloody doings, but diplomatic negotiations settled the problem peacefully. At the direction of the Central Committee, Stalin proposed to the compromise leaders to adopt joint measures for the bloodless termination of the action of the Kronstadt men. In company with the Menshevik Bogdanov, who had no difficulty in persuading the sailors to accept Lieber's ultimatum of the day before, when the government armored cars approached the fortress, a deputation came out of its gate announcing that the garrison would submit to the executive committee. The weapons given up by the sailors and soldiers were carried away in trucks. The disarmed sailors were sent to the barges for return to Kronstadt. The surrender of the fortress may be considered the concluding episode of the July movement. A bicycle brigade, the bicycle brigade came back. That's an old throwback to one of the earlier episodes. Anyway, a bicycle brigade from the front occupied the house of Kasheniskaya and the Peter and Paul fortress. This brigade, in its turn, will go over on the eve of the October Revolution to the Bolsheviks. So, Trotsky is an amazing writer. If there's a way to describe that chapter, we could call it The Empire Strikes Back. The Sith are pissed. The Jedis have been going crazy on that ass, and the Sith struck back with a vengeance. But Trotsky gives us a little bit of hope at the end of the chapter that essentially, even these soldiers who are repressing the revolution, they will come and join the revolution, the real revolution, when October comes. But we're only in July, and Trotsky is literally doing this day by day, month by month, as he breaks down the events that led to the October Revolution and the Russian Civil War and the Soviets eventually taking power. This is an epic story, once again. So yeah, there's a lot to discuss and break down, and I think I did a pretty good job today in this very long live stream. We've been on live about 3 hours. Been on live about 3 hours in total. So it's not easy, but it was definitely entertaining, engaging, funny. I enjoyed sending so many people to the gulag today. I enjoyed sending so many people to the re-education camp today. I enjoyed chatting it up with the people that came to actually talk about the text and engage with our topic. It's been absolutely fun. Shout out to everybody that joined this live stream who got to stay. Shout out to Onyx. Shout out to Rai Brown. Shout out to Anon Watcher. Shout out to Ah1361. Shout out to Killer Crows. Nah, Killer Crows can stay in the gulag. Who else got to stay in the comment section? It's pretty much only Smiling is Free got to stay. Just Raven was up in here as well. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the vertical live stream. And of course, shout out my top commissar, Kareth, up in the horizontal live stream. He was asking some very good questions and doing some very good banter as well. So y'all be easy out there. All power to the people, and